All right, good afternoon. Half a day. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. Today is Tuesday, September 29th. The time now is 2 o'clock. Welcome to everyone connected by Zoom and those tuning in via television or the YouTube channel. Thank you for your patience in accommodating this Zoom platform while we maintain social distancing mandates. Public notice were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on Tuesday, September 22nd, and on Thursday, September 24th. The following item will be discussed at this 2 o'clock hearing, which will end at 4, is Bill 368-35 LS, authored by Madam Speaker Tina Rose Newman Barnes, co-sponsored by Senator Jose Pito Talay, an act to add a new Article 1A to Chapter 2, Title 30, Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations relative to cigarette tax stamp, and to require the Department of Revenue and Taxation to issue a request for proposal for the enforcement of tobacco taxes identified by the Director of Revenue and Taxation on behalf of the Government of Guam. General Rules of Conduct. This Zoom meeting is hosted by my staff and will mute all Zoom participants until called upon. Members of the committee and or non-committee members wishing to speak may indicate their desire to the chair to me through the in-app chat feature. Individuals testifying shall be recognized by myself before speaking and begin by stating your name for record-keeping purposes. When called to speak, please ensure that you are unmuted. Committee members will be allowed to pose a question to an individual testifying. Questions and testimonies shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the public hearing by the host. Please ensure that your video remains on throughout the hearing. Participants must be visible at all times and not engage in other activities during the hearing. Other than if you need to take a drink, not a problem. Failure to maintain visibility may cause your removal from the meeting live stream. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me this afternoon. We have Madam Speaker Tina Moon Barnes present. We have the Legislative Secretary, Senator Amanda Shelton. We have Senator Sabina Perez. We have Senator Luis Muñoz. And we also have Senator Therese Terlai. At this point, I'd like the Speaker, Senator Tina Rose Newman Barnes, to provide an opening statement, and then we will proceed with the testimony of this bill, 368. Ma'am?
Thank you, Senator San Agustin, for giving me the opportunity to do openings for this bill 368-35 LS, and I'd like to thank my co-sponsor, Senator Pito Jose Terlai, for being a part of the co-sponsorship. This bill that has been introduced is here before my colleagues, as 3 years ago, after the law has been passed to adequately collect taxes off of each cigarette pack, I still don't see stamps. And I know that the Department of Revenue and Tax has stated on the record of November of 2018 that it's simply too expensive to implement the law. And I just want to note, Mr. Chair, that was from the previous administration's take, but I can further clarify that based on the public auditors' recommendations. And as oversight chair of OPA, this is one of the considerations why this bill was also taken into account. And I have heard from tobacco distributors and stakeholders in the community that based on the revenues collected in tobacco taxes as well as their payments, I really think that we are not collecting the taxes of cigarettes sold here in our island of Guam. And what I guess frustrates me is that every policymaker here has stated time and time again that our hospital's roof is falling and is dilapidated. It's an old hospital. Our public health needs money, and we need to fund education. And I want to share with you that the majority of these programs and initiatives are funded by the Healthy Futures Funds. And furthermore, I know that when each consumer buys their pack of cigarettes, the consumer is paying their fair share of sin taxes. Yet somehow this doesn't come back to the government's coffers. And I know that individual store owners are not responsible for paying these taxes as they pay for the distributor's share. Also, Mr. Chair, based on the data shared with me, it is unfortunate that we have more cigarettes being brought into the island, yet our tax collections have not risen proportionately. And I know that Department of Revenue and Taxation, um, and in no way, Mr. Chair, am I saying that under the leadership now of Director Shimizu and the men and women who go the extra mile every single day, that they're not doing their jobs. I know that they have stepped up to the process of the EIPs, the Adjuda Mangafa program, and also made strides in improving their processes in general. I also know that they enforce the ABC laws, the bed and breakfast law, the licensing enforcement, and there is simply a lot to do on their plate with limited resources that they have. And I introduced this bill to hopefully take a load off their shoulders and find ways to improve collections in this initiative. Ultimately, also, Mr. Chair, improving our healthcare facilities and funding educational programs, and even supporting and helping our cancer patients. Mr. Chair, we have an opportunity that all taxes paid by tobacco users, that those taxes be recorded appropriately and clearly based on the audits as the oversight chair, as I stated earlier, and based on the research, the systems are not being worked out at this present time. And it is important that we fill any gaps where public money is not being recorded properly. And I personally believe that a lot of the money that comes from this should go also to our hospital and taking care of Department of Revenue and Taxes. They are the arm that collects all the taxes for the people of Guam. And I do want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity. I do have about 4 questions but I'd like to hear what those that will be presenting today, and hopefully I can scratch out some of the questions I have. If not, I literally have about 3 or 4 questions on board. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to open with this Bill 368-35, and hoping to hear any pros and cons regarding this effort moving forward.
All right, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to also recognize 2 additional colleagues that have joined us. We have Senator Mary Camacho Torres and Senator Tello Taidewi that have also joined us. I'd like to also recognize in our midst here, we have Michelle Santos, Deputy Director from the Department of Revenue and Taxation. We have also Mr. Ricardo Duenas from WESCO. That's WSTCO, WESCO. I would assume that's how it's pronounced, huh, Ricardo? And then we've got Art Logan, former Director of Revenue and Tax. I'm not too sure which company he represents, probably Cobbles, and I would assume that would be safe to say. That being said, I would begin with the Director of Revenue and Taxation. She wanted to make any comments, I know that, Michelle, you did submit to the speaker back in last year on October 2019. You did submit a letter with recommended amendments to the bill. And maybe you can go over your testimony and then we put it in for record. All right, okay. Michelle, you ready?
Earlier, Senator, I emailed our testimony, but if it's okay with you, I'll just go ahead and read it, okay?
Yes, please.
Yes. Hafaday Senator San Agustin and members of the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing. Bill number 368-35 proposes to add a new Article 1A to Chapter 2, Title 30, the Guam Code annotated to make the Department of Revenue and Taxation issue an RFP to hire a company to enforce the tobacco taxes and administer the cigarette tax stamp program mandated under Public Law 34-55. The department takes the position of opposing this proposed legislation. We submit the following concerns. In October of 2019, we submitted a letter identifying critical items that needed to be addressed in order to move forward. These items were never addressed nor discussed with us. There were a few attempts to meet, but never materialized. Our department would like these items discussed. DRT never implemented the cigarette stamp tax because it was an unfunded mandate, and we needed clarification from the Attorney General that it was not a double taxation. This bill dictates that the RFP include drafting of any rules and regs when the rules and regs are already provided in the bill. A vendor should not be providing rules and regs for enforcement and administration of a tax for the government of Guam. Payment to the potential offerer is exorbitant. We estimate this to be $3 to $4 million a year. This amount is monies that is diverted away from the Healthy Futures Funds that affects the following agencies: DOE, GMH, Public Health, Guam Behavioral and Wellness, DISIT, DYA, and Guam Autism. DRT was not afforded any input with the rules and regs in this bill, and it would seem that we have more work to do with respect to the enforcement and administration. We offer to work with the Attorney General to develop an RFP. At the very minimum, we would like to have a vendor or an offerer to sell stamps, provide equipment, and train wholesalers to use the equipment. At the very least, DRT is willing to do what it can to not pay the exorbitant fee of 12% of our revenues. Thank you, Senator San Agustin and members of the committee for this opportunity to submit testimony on this bill. Please contact us should you need further assistance.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you, Michelle. I do have a copy, and I know my colleagues should have a copy of the list of items that DRT did
Yeah.
recommend.
I can resend that.
Did you-
I can
Right,
resend that.
okay, did you want to discuss that, Michelle, page for page, so that everybody has an understanding of what was your recommendation, so that everybody generally understands what are the possible amendments that will happen to the bill as it's written?
It's kind of lengthy.
Lengthy? Okay, then we'll just go over it. I'll go over it with you guys and the speaker after this hearing, so we can make sure that we understand, and all my colleagues have received a copy. We
Okay.
also have all right, thank you.
Yes.
We also have Mr. Ricardo Duenas from Wesco. He did submit testimony for this bill. Sir, if you can go ahead and, you see, your testimony is kind of lengthy. Also, you got more than 5 pages, huh? Or 4 pages.
Sorry about that.
So, sir, if you want, you can summarize it, or you can read it through. I have no problem with that. All my colleagues will get a copy, or they should have a copy of it already.
Well, I think I would like to read it because there are some items in here that were not touched upon by revenue and taxation. First of all, my name is Ricardo Duenas. I represent Western Sales Trading Company, and I would like to thank the chairman, and the speaker, and all the senators for allowing me this opportunity to come before you to provide testimony in support of Bill 368-35. We believe this bill will provide an initial first step in establishing a tax stamp program. And although it may need certain amendments to clarify and strengthen its provisions, it is necessary to move this process forward that has been stalled for over 3 years. We believe that the territory is rife with untaxed black market cigarettes from numerous sources. And let's be frank, if taxes have not been paid, then these are black market cigarettes. Following a report by the OPA on November 25th, 2019, the public auditor stated in a June 17th, 2020 interview with the Guam Daily Post that, quote, I believe the Gov Guam could be losing as much as 10 million, maybe as much as $15 million in uncollected tobacco taxes. Without the immediate implementation of Public Law 34-55 regarding tobacco stamps, Gov Guam will continue to hemorrhage $10 to $15 million each year. That's $10 to $15 million that should be going to the Healthy Futures Fund. More importantly, that's $10 to $15 million that could be going to the Guam Memorial Hospital, which has been appropriated $10 million for the repair of their roof that has never been transferred over. Given the magnitude of this loss, This demands the highest priority by the legislative and executive branches of the government. Now, tobacco stamps provide a simple, proven, visible cue to determine if any pack of cigarettes in any store has been tax paid, regardless of where those cigarettes come, be it from a established bonded warehouse smuggled in the rear of a 40-foot container, or leaked out from airport duty-free or military commissary stores. If it is being sold in the Guam market or a Guam store and does not have a valid Guam tax stamp, it must be considered untaxed black market contraband. You can have every conversation regarding the efficiency of a bonded warehouse system or the difficulty in standing up such a tax stamp program. But the simple fact is that without a visible cue that the tobacco stamp provides, it is impossible to identify black market cigarettes on Guam. And this is a fact that every black market operator knows and takes advantage of. The benefits of the tax stamp program are incontrovertible. It was debated during the hearings for Bill 77-34, and it was vetted by the 34th Guam legislature, and by a unanimous vote of 15-0, it was approved to become Public Law 34-55 on October 2017. So if the law has been passed, why do we need Bill 368? In the 3 years since the passage of Public Law 34-55, it appears little action has been taken. The law mandated Department of Revenue and Taxation to promulgate rules and regulations for the implementation of the stamp tax program to be effective by October 2018. And to date, no such rules or regulations have been presented for review. Therefore, we applaud Speaker Munya Barnes and Senator Pito Terlahi for introducing this bill and recognizing that the continued loss of substantial revenue cannot persist. Now, in response to the OPA's reaction, as well as others in the legislature, has been to throw their hands up in the air and call for the elimination of the bonded warehouse. Now, of course, black market smugglers, operators would love this. Every modern economy in the world uses a combination of bonded warehouses, tax stamps, and effective communication and enforcement between customs and taxation officials to protect their borders and preserve their tax base. Without a tax stamp and a bonded warehouse system, the borders are essentially open and unprotected. In spite of their limited resource, we have seen improvements in revenue and taxation in the operation of the bonded warehouse over the last 12 months. However, it is clear that the expertise does not exist within the government to implement a tax stamping program. Now, outside help is needed and it is available and can be utilized by utilizing a qualified third party that can leverage their experience and expertise to implement a tax stamp program. To determine the appropriate length. Now, in the revenue taxation, keep in mind, under the law or under the proposed bill, there are no rules and regulations. It's been mandated in the bill and in the previous public law. The revenue and taxation promulgate these rules and regulations. So by passing this bill, revenue and taxation will still have the opportunity to promulgate rules and regulations. They will have the opportunity to negotiate with any interested parties making a proposal. They will have the opportunity to determine the length of the contract. So once a program is stood up, they can limit it for a number of years. They can limit it for 1 year if they wanted to. They can negotiate the 12% compensation rate as well. So there is still a lot of flexibility. The bill really just gives the opportunity for the government and revenue and taxations to start exploring what their options are in putting these things together. And by their own admission, they've said, one, they don't have the expertise, and two, they feel it's too expensive. But keep in mind, by the OPA's own estimation of $10 to $15 million in uncollected tobacco taxes versus what they've said is too expensive, those costs could be recaptured all within 1 year plus more. Now, currently, most licensed cigarette distributors operate a bonded warehouse on their premises under the control and monitoring of revenue and taxation. And as we have seen in the OPH report, this system is open to abuse and error. The failings of the current bonded warehouse can be fixed by opening and operating a modern, central bonded facility that utilizes 21st century technologies in the areas of physical storage, inventory control, assessment billing, and collection of excise taxes. All of these that can be done by an independent third party. Under Bill 368, an independent third party would be utilized to fix tobacco stamps for several licensed distributors. Now, in order to efficiently operate in fixing these tobacco stamps, each pack of cigarettes for each distributor, it would be necessary, although not addressed in the current bill, to establish a centralized bonded warehouse. Such a centralized bonded warehouse would be operated by the independent third party with agents of revenue and taxations and Guam Customs on site. Licensed distributors would no longer need to maintain bonded warehouses on their premises, but would be required to, or could be required to contract with a central bond for the storage of cigarettes, awaiting tax stamping, or issuing for export off island. The cost to the licensed distributors would be offset by the rental savings realized by eliminating their private bond. By eliminating the use of distributor housed bonded warehouses in favor of an independent third-party operated central bond, you would eliminate the perception of basically the fox guarding the hen house. Utilizing a central bond would streamline bonded operations. It would optimize excise tax collections. It would ease staffing demands for revenue and taxation. It would minimize scheduling backlogs created by having multiple bonded warehouses, and it would provide greater responsiveness to the users. Thus, an amendment to Bill 368 should be considered to expand the authority to include an established bonded facility. Now, as drafted, the bill provides for the compensation of 12% of tobacco tax collections. Now, is this too much to pay for? An experienced operator would need to design and produce appropriate tax decals, procure application equipment capable of processing sufficient quantities required by current consumption. Staff would be needed and employed and trained. Warehousing would need to be secured, and a sophisticated system to track issuing of tax stamps, collection of tax payments, remittance of real-time reporting to taxing authorities would be developed. And as I stated, Bill 368 provides for compensation up to 12%. Thus, revenue and taxation and the legislature does have the flexibility to evaluate compensation based on proposals submitted by interested bidders and adjust such rate based on the costs and scope contained in each bid. Compensation could be based on a sliding scale that focuses more toward increased collection on established base amount. If a central bond is included in the bill, some cost recoveries could be realized in the form of rental charges to the licensed distributors, thus providing further reduction of the 12% proposed rate. Now, let's talk about some of the opportunities that we can realize in addition to increased collections. By having a centralized bond, it provides for long-term opportunities that can be realized. Aside from improving immediate tax collections, a more permanent customs facility could be developed on the property that has been transferred to the Guam Customs from the Port Authority in Guam on a build, operate, transfer agreement. Thus, the funding of the construction of this facility could be built into the 12% fee. With increased capacity, Guam Customs Department could enhance their capabilities to inspect incoming cargo, not only for tobacco compliance, but also for increased interdiction of drugs and other contraband. With increased capacity, attention could be focused on establishing a new industry also, where Guam could serve as a pre-clearance port to alleviate U.S. Customs backlogs at West Coast sea and airports. All of these could be accomplished by having a centralized bonded facility. The point is that such considerations should be addressed either through amendments to the bill and establishing these rules and regulations that are already required under Public Law 34-55. Further, additional requirements to safeguard the government could be designed into the bid scope. Bid qualifications could include proof of independence to ensure no conflict of interest exists with any of the proposers, posting a fiduciary bond to protect the government's interests, and requiring an annual independent audit to verify that all proper taxes have been assessed and collected. As I've discussed, Bill 35 is a start. It is time to upgrade our current system. Tax stamping paired with modern centralized bonding warehouses is that upgrade. With Bill 368, we have the opportunity to do this by utilizing an independent third party in a fiduciary role as a trusted partner to both the industry and the government. Now, the alternative is to continue to sit on our hands and complain how we need to improve collections, how we need to utilize technology to improve our operations, how we need to develop new industries. All the while we do nothing, we continue to lose $10 to $15 million as estimated by the public auditor. Now, while the focus of tax stamps over the past few years has been on cigarettes, there is evidence that abuses in reporting of excise taxes relating to alcohol beverage also exist. As with tobacco excise taxes, many jurisdictions in the US and around the world utilize tax stamps as a means to effectively enforce alcohol taxes as well. So, we have a sister company, SD Corporation, who is also an alcohol distributor, and we contend that the tax stamp could effectively be established for alcohol as well as cigarettes. And this is something that we give our full support. Now, many of you may be wondering why a tobacco and liquor distributor would be in support of legislation that would establish further regulation of our own industry. And admittedly, it appears to be counterintuitive. Some of you may ask, why does Wesco and ST do they have some kind of self-interest in this bill? And in truth, one of the biggest threats to any licensed, legitimate, compliant cigarette and liquor distributor is the issue of smuggled or black market products into Guam. We know that there are black market cigarettes and liquor out there, and every pack of black market cigarettes or bottle of untaxed alcohol that enters Guam untaxed robs us of a legitimate distributor of those sales. So yes, it is in my interest that this bill be passed, but it is also in the interest of every legitimate tobacco and liquor distributor. But more importantly, it is in the interest of the government of Guam and every senator to vigorously enforce tobacco and liquor tax collections. And therefore, we ask every member of this body and the administration to support and pass this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, thank you, Ricardo. Art, you're still there? Art, do you have any testimony you want to present?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, I have a
Freezing.
You muted yourself again. Unmute again, Art. There you go. Unmute again, one more time. You're still muted, Art.
yes. Can you hear me now?
There you go. Now you're good.
Okay. My testimony is almost the same as Michelle's about the operations of revenue tax. So let me read it. My name is Artie Logan. I am the former director of Revenue and Taxation. I am here testifying my concerns regarding Bill number 368-35. This bill proposes to enact administrative rules and regulations relative to cigarette tax stamps. Enacting this bill will cost the consumers, the Healthy Futures Fund, and the licensed wholesalers millions of dollars to implement. First is my objection to the act itself. I can understand a state implementing a stamp act. There are 48 contiguous states in the Union. Each state has its own taxing regulations and jurisdiction. The probability of interstate transportation and selling of cigarettes can easily occur, whereby the state where these illegal cigarettes are imported are escaping taxation by that state. Here in Guam, in our island, we only have 3 points of entry: the port, the airport, and the postal service. These entry points are closely monitored by the Guam Customs and Quarantine. Illegal importation of cigarettes should be confiscated at point of entry, just as illegal drugs are confiscated. The illegal importation and sale of cigarettes are not committed by the licensed cigarette wholesalers. Cigarette wholesalers are heavily regulated by DRT, revenue tax, and the bonded warehouse system. Each stick of cigarette is accounted for, and cigarettes are sold by licensed wholesalers are not escaping taxation. The perpetrators are those retailers who illegally import cigarettes through our 1 point of entries and not through a licensed wholesaler. The law proposes to spend 12% of the tax collected and appropriate it to the Healthy Future Fund on a private third-party vendor. The current revenues at the end of August is around $36 million this year. By the end of the fiscal year, the Healthy Futures Fund is expected to collect $41 million. The proposed 12% fee is an expenditure that can cost the fund about $5 million. The expenditure is simply outrageous. Instead, DRT could more than double the number of compliance officers to monitor the cigarette sales at a fraction of the cost. Looking at DRT staffing pattern, there are 6 compliance officers positions in the alcoholic beverage control branch. They are 1 compliance supervisor, 1 compliance officer 2, and 4 compliance officer 1. The total appropriation for personnel in the ABC budget branch is $283,602.22. Amongst their duties, they are responsible for monitoring the bonded cigarette warehouse. In addition to DRT's annual budget, there are 3 specific special funds being appropriated to DRT. The first was introduced by the late Senator Ben Pangilinan and passed by the legislature. This fund was a percentage of the license fees that DRT processed through their department. This fund increased the DRT budget to assist in processing of licenses, as well as aided in the funding for revenue enhancement and law enforcement. A second special fund was the passport fees. Senator Klitsky introduced this bill and was passed by the legislature. This allowed for an additional funding. DRT took over the processing of U.S. passports, and the fees collected were equally allocated between the Guam Public Library and Department of Revenue and Taxation. The third special fund was appropriated from the insurance and banking fees. This law was introduced by Senator Dennis Rodriguez and passed by the legislature. The fund appropriation assisted it just a 4th special fund for revenue tax, an appropriation of less than $41 million Healthy Futures tax collection a year. An estimation is about $300,000. This appropriation buys cigarette wholesalers, retailers of cigarettes, and assists the ABC branch in their other duties. This legislature recently passed a bill to transfer $500,000 from the recycling fund, revolving fund, to the University of Guam to fund the Green Growth Initiative. This legislature should also pass a bill to transfer $300,000 from the Healthy Futures Fund to a grossly underfunded ABC branch of Revenue and Taxation. Lowest salary for a compliance officer officer 1 in the budget is $37,324.11. This is a step 3 salary and includes all the employee benefits the employee is entitled, including a share of retirement, Medicare, medical, and dental insurance. 5 additional employees will only cost the Healthy Futures Fund $200,000 to $300,000 versus $5 million allowed by the Stamp Act to be paid to a private party. My second concern is the collection of taxes. The collection of the cigarette taxes is placed solely on the government of Guam as codified by the Organic Act of Guam. I believe that's the governor of Guam. The administration and enforcement of the Guam territorial income tax shall be performed or under the supervision of the governor. Any functions needful to the administration and enforcement of income tax laws in the force of Guam pursuant to Section A of this section shall be performed by any officer or employee of the government of Guam duly authorized by the governor, directly, indirectly, or by one or more redelegation of authority to perform such functions. My third concern is the application of the government code of ethics. All government of Guam employees are regulated by the government code of ethics. Private sector employees are not. For GCA Chapter 15 Standard of Conduct of Elected Officials, Appointed Officers, and Public Employees of the Government of Guam, it includes gifts, reporting of gifts, confidential information, fair treatment, conflict of interest, contracts, and contracts voidable. Government employees who breach the code of ethics may be criminally prosecuted. I just want to make you remember back in my time when I was director in early mid 2000, like 2008, 7, there was an incident where employees in our department, ABC branch, were being monitored by the FBI, and they were picked up and they were prosecuted for accepting bribes. This is the law that says they can't do that. Lastly, my fourth concern is the process of adjudication, a violation of law. The government has set procedures to fairly adjudicate violations of law before it goes to court. The finding of a violation by an outsourced company is only adjudicated through the court system. 368-35 for the following reasons. Director Daphne Samisu, Deputy Michelle Santos, Paul Pablo, Craig Macho are doing an exceptional job with monitoring the bonded warehouse. The collection of the Healthy Futures Fund is already projected to be approximately $41 million. The port of entries are monitored by the Customs and Quarantine Agency for contraband. The third is the administration of taxes is solely the responsibility of the government of Guam. The fourth is the cost to implement this law is ridiculously high, $5 million, that 12% of $41 million. Just hire 5 employees, compliance officers to augment ABC branch at a cost of about $200,000 to $300,000. The government code of Guam, the code of ethics, only applies to government employees and not the private sector employees. For a victim who was, or not a victim, but a violator of the law, except through the court system. I kind of disagree with implementing this law until we can fairly say that these vendors or wholesalers are I know they're paying their taxes. I know it's of each cigarette. It's other things that are concerns the collection of taxes. I will submit my testimony to the legislature. I thank you.
Thank you, Art. Thank you, Art, for your testimony. I'd like to also recognize other colleagues that have joined us. I see Senator Peter, the co-sponsor of the bill, and I thought I saw Sabina Perez. Senator Sabina Perez is also here. But I got a simple question for Michelle before I ask the speaker to ask her question. Very simple question, because both Ricardo mentioned it and about bonded warehouse. And it's quite understood that it was also mentioned that everything could be intercepted at the port, but also the black market. You never know how it's going to get in until it comes in. But I got a simple question to Michelle to start with her, and then Ricardo can respond, and then Art. If we eliminate the bonded warehouse and then everything is caught at the port and custom is taxes it off the bat and then secured there in another form of not a bonded warehouse, but not a privately bonded warehouse, but a government bonded, where it's run through there, it's taxed there, then it's run out from there. Would there be an issue for the tax stamp? Maybe for the black market, but I don't think in general. Michelle, maybe you can comment to that, and then I'll ask Ricardo for his comment based on his testimony, and then I'll ask Art the same thing, because I do support increasing funding for compliance. I was there before. Michelle, if you can unmute, please. Michelle, unmute first.
Senator, we don't oppose that sort of tax system. We actually welcome it. It would be less work for the department. I believe we've discussed this before, where it would be simpler for the department, for us not to have to do bonded. It would be simpler and easier for the department, for our compliance staff. But of course, we will do whatever is necessary and whatever is mandated. But the beauty of that is the taxes are collected up front. And wholesalers would just have to plan for that. If they choose to import, so many, they have to be prepared to pay for the taxes right up front. It's just a matter of planning, but I support that system. I support if those changes were made, and so will my staff. Thank you.
All right. On that same note, when you mentioned, Michelle, before I ask Ricardo and Art for their comment, when we talk about the collection of taxes and for the vendors to pay taxes up front, because the department does have a system in place where they can defer payment, where they can pay as they as funding is available from the different distributors, where they don't have to pay. Like, in other words, if they bring in $1 million worth of tobacco a month, they can defer setting up a payment plan. And I know the department has that mechanism in place. Am I correct? So that can be set up where it doesn't run the businesses broke, where they'll bring in more than they really can sell.
Senator, I'm not familiar with that deferment plan. We don't do that. Yeah, at this point, no.
Okay. I'll talk to you offline on that one. Okay, Ricardo, would you have any comments to that one in reference to the bonded warehouse? Because I know in your statement, you did testify that you need the bonded warehouse to prevent the black market. But I'm concerned about that if the bonded warehouse was controlled by the customs, where it's processed through that and the taxes are collected. But I guess based on your statement, you still wanted the tobacco stamp no matter what.
Well, first of all, let me state that I think that the elimination of a bonded warehouse system is a step backward. You have to understand that in every modern economy in the world, bonded warehouses are used to control and monitor taxation of items coming in. Now, for Guam to simply say, it's too hard, it's too difficult, we should take a step backwards in time and just eliminate the bond. It should be the answer. And the answer isn't to step backwards. The answer is to move forward and to modernize and to use technology in every advantage that we can. Now, with the bonded warehouse, that's just one factor in accurately and adequately collecting our taxes. Without a tax stamp, when you walk into a store and you look up on the shelf and you see a carton or a pack of cigarettes, there is no way for you to know if that pack of cigarettes has had its taxes paid. So for Art to say that there's only 3 points of entry, fine, there's only 3 ports of entry and we have safeguards to protect those borders, but we know that cigarettes are getting out there. I mean, by his own admission, Art said that several years ago, there was a conspiracy among certain employees within the government and private industry to smuggle cigarettes in. And we alerted people to that fact at a time, back in that time, and no one ever did anything. Because when you look at the cigarettes, how can you tell that illegal pack of cigarettes from a legally tax-paid cigarette? You don't have that visible cue. You need that tax stamp in order to ensure that whatever is being sold has had its taxes paid, whether it's coming from a bonded warehouse. Now we've had instances where cigarettes have been issued out of bond, and in errors made in accounting or misunderstanding of the law, that the taxes weren't paid, and those were come to be found later on. I mean, if we find we made an error in inventorying our cigarettes that were pulled out of bond, then yes, we would have to pay those. We have to pay those taxes. If taxes were being sold under a buy one get one free or a rebate or whatever, some other program, and taxes were saying, oh well, we don't need to pay that because we didn't sell it, we gave it away. That's wrong. The law says any cigarette that enters the market, whether it's being sold or not, anything that enters the stream, the marketing stream, the stream of commerce, must have its taxes paid. Without that tax stamp, you don't know. Without a bonded warehouse, we're moving backwards in time. And that's the position that we've taken.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from, Ricardo, but being that I worked in compliance, and Art knows that, I worked with the Department of Revenue Tax. When we talk about tobacco and alcohol, there is a means of identifying which one is from the base and which is not from the base, and which one comes from the vendor, because a lot of the compliance people work with a lot of the vendors, so we can identify which pack of cigarette actually came from the market and which and so forth. But I won't open up that for discussion. Art, do you have any comment to what I've asked? And then I'm going to move to the speaker, the author of the bill, for her questions.
I think the thing is fairness in taxation. With your suggestion of taxing the cigarettes as they come in and it's not sold yet, it's sitting in a warehouse, and the company that brought it in is losing money, interest, because they paid GovGuam for the items, for taxes on taxes for it, and it's sitting in an item. The way that the warehouse works is it goes into the warehouse, they don't pay tax until it's withdrawn. And I think Michelle and Daphne and Craig and Paul have been doing a great job of collecting what is owed to them. They monitor that pretty well. Also, when it comes to fairness, I mean, if you're going to tax a cigarette tax or cigarettes only when it comes in, then you should look at GRT. A lot of income is not coming in through GRT, and we lack enforcement because revenue tax does not have the resources. You lack an ABC. You look at audit, very weak. I can tell you it's weak because they're not I don't want to talk about because that's under Michelle. She wants to say what she wants to say about the department, but at my time, I tried to improve the quality of auditors into the department so that when they look at issues, they would see that somebody didn't pay their taxes. No one's doing, I don't know if anybody's doing that now. I don't know if they're trained, but if you're looking at GRT, you should do the same with GRT. People are bringing in items, and are they paying taxes on that? We don't know.
All right, thank you, Art. Madam Speaker, open for you to ask all the questions you want, and then we'll move to, let me see. Yeah, and then we'll move to Senator Amanda Shelton, and then your co-sponsor would ask questions, okay?
Yes.
Speaker.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I did have, and I want to say thank you for the first question that you asked because it just knocked out number one from my several questions. I did have a follow-up for my Primo and Art. Primo and Art, you mentioned that you were here representing the Cowboys, right? Or are you representing yourself as a former director, or are you doing both, Primo? Which is it?
I'm doing it as myself from my experience at Rev and Tax. When I was there almost 40 years. So I
Yes.
know that it starts with you build your base at the fundamentals and you bring them up. I was one of those. I started there when I was young. I'm mid-60s now.
Yeah.
Right.
So please don't get offended. I just wanted to make sure that I was getting that representation because I know that Mr. Dueñas spoke about representing two companies. So I just wanted to make sure that I got that. So you're representing yourself as a former director and
Right.
being in the government like the good OFB chair for many decades, right?
Right.
So
I also work for a company called EC Development. It's a company under Calvos, but I don't work with MidPAC.
okay, just wanted to make sure, please, just wanted to verify that. But I also wanted to bring up the question because you said that based on the three points of entry, right? I know that we here on Guam, maybe 100 years ago, we produced copra and I don't think tobacco and coffee and others, right? So I wanted to ask you that based on those 3 points of entry, not my analysis and my assessments on the audits, it was from the auditor. If that is what and we have those 3 points of entry, how are we losing that much money, anywhere between 10 and $15 million? And then the other question to the follow-up on that is if we were going to pay, sometimes you have to pay a little to get back a lot, right? It's called leveraging. So maybe putting in a couple of $1 million to be able to get 10 to $15 million back. And I've always known it as a public-private partnership. How does that work into the equation for Guam? So I guess those are kind of like a two-part, three-part question that I want to see if I can get your thoughts on that, Primo. I mean, sorry, not Art.
Okay. Anyways, you're kind of long, so I'm kind of confused with the question. But enforcement of the law should be with Rev and Tax. You shouldn't outsource like audit to do an audit on tobacco. It should be somebody within the office who knows about tobacco, knows the procedures, who looks at those issues and collects those taxes. If the issue is the 3 points of entry, how do these cigarettes come in? Are we giving enough resources to Customs and Quarantine, to Rev and Tax, to monitor these things? I think that's the first point, and that's always been an issue.
Yeah, but if the government money is leaking, I mean, there is money that we're not getting, and so there's a leakage here. So
Right.
how
I think
does that
the last year or so with Michelle and Daphne and Craig and Paul, that the money has gone up. If you look at collections of the Healthy Futures Fund, it has gone up.
Okay.
They're monitoring it well.
Well, the audit says
prior.
anywhere between 10 and 15 million, and as the oversight chair, that's why this bill was proposed from my perspective,
Right.
only because the audit findings shows a little bit different, and I'm not going to second guess, but I can bring to the same table the parties of Rev and Tax, OPA, and all that to find out where the leakage is here and why we're escaping that. Because if we can address the 10 to 15 million dollars that the auditor has said is been escaping our island, then yes, there is a possibility that maybe we can look at some kind of public private partnership, or even, and again, the bill calls for an up to 12%. If we were to look out and give an RFP out, it doesn't say that you're going to pay the 12%. If the government of Guam can negotiate 2%, 3%, that's something that also can be negotiated. And I think it's important that we realize that. For me, it's how do I bring more money back into Guam, especially during these trying times? And if there is something escaping us right now, and there's a leakage there, then I have to be able to look at it. And the numbers based on the audit shows that Guam is losing that much. So that's a thought, Mr. Chair, that I just wanted to share. The second question I have is based on Mr. Dueñas's testimony. I wanted to ask him, the government collected last month about 2.4 million and in tobacco taxes. And I wanted to ask you how much, if you can answer this question, how much has your company paid in taxes at least last month?
Well, first of all, let me preface that Western Sales Trading Company, we estimate that of the total cigarette market, that we control anywhere from 50 to 55% of the market of all the cigarettes that are sold out there in the gas stations and stores. I'll tell you right now, on a consistently on a monthly basis, we pay anywhere from $1.8 to $2 million every month on tobacco taxes alone, and this is just on the cigarettes. Now, you mentioned that in August there was about $2.4 million in collections for cigarette taxes. In August, I believe, let me look at we collected, or we paid about $1.9 million of that 22.4 million. That's about 80%. We paid 80% of the tax, when by our estimation, we control maybe 50 to 55% of the market. I hope that answers your question.
So how does that equate to the 5 distributors here when you've paid 80% of the market? I mean, is it just you bringing in the majority of the tobacco here? I mean, I'm trying to understand.
Well, as I said, we pay consistently. When I've studied the numbers, we pay consistently every month a certain amount based on what we withdraw from the bond, and this is verified by Revenue and Taxation what we withdraw. So we will pay anywhere from $1.8 to $2.2 million, and we're consistent because we understand our business. We know how much we need to. We make sure that we're rarely out of stock of product. So all I can speak to is knowing what I pay on cigarettes that I've withdrawn. And I didn't realize that you guys collected $2.4 million in August, but I know I paid $1.9 million. I can't account for anyone else but myself.
Can I ask Reverend Tax if they'd like to chime in about the payments? I'm just trying to understand it because I've got a couple of more questions, but maybe Reverend Tax can chime in. I mean, how it's
Speaker, I can get back to you on those numbers. I didn't prepare for that. I don't have the numbers of what was collected last. Yeah. And I don't know if that I can disclose that.
And I want you to know that based on the latest CRER numbers, some of those numbers were brought, that's how these numbers were brought up. So I was just wanting to take that in as we again look at trying to see how we can collect more money for the government. This was one avenue that and vision that can be looked at. So I think my question again, and it's for Mr. Dueñas, is why should the development of the tobacco tax stamp be privatized, and why shouldn't we rely on revenue taxation to develop the program internally?
That's a good question. I guess it goes back to what have we done in the last 3 years? This law was passed in 2017 and given a sunset of 2018 to promulgate rules and regulations. And in that year, I know that during that year, and that was under the prior administration, we had several stakeholder meetings with revenue and taxation to discuss, okay, how would this thing be implemented? How can it be implemented? What needs to be done? Who sells equipment? Who sells decals? How would you guys feel about this and that? And that was all in middle of 2018. And then nothing came from it. And since 2018 to date, there are still no rules and regulations. So I've heard a lot of discussion that it's hard and that it's difficult and it's expensive. And I agree, it is hard, it is difficult, and it is expensive. But keep in mind that we're not reinventing the wheel. We are trying to implement a program that's in existence in 48 states and I believe 2 or 3 territories, and in multiple countries within around the world. So we're not creating a whole new system. And there are experts out there in the US alone that have a vast majority of experience in how to do these things. So to say that it's hard, yes, it's hard. To say that it's difficult, yes, it's difficult. To say that it's expensive, yes, it probably is going to be expensive, but certainly it's not going to cost us $10 to $15 million a year, which is revenue that the OPA has said that we're losing annually. So I think there is justification to move forward so that we can modernize our system, get the taxes that we're truly owed, and fund a lot of these programs, including the hospital's roof, please.
Yeah. I think, Mr. Duenas, you answered my last question, my question on the implementation of what you've seen, the actions of what revenue taxes made, and I think we just want to see them start the program. My other question to you is that you did mention, can you hear me? You did
Yes.
mention expanding the tax stamp program to include, and I heard you say this, and I just wanted to get a verification. You wanted to include the alcoholic beverages, and I want to ask you why. I want to ask, is there a problem with the current system or reporting and collecting of alcohol taxes that we don't know of?
Yes, you're correct. I did mention including alcohol taxes through a stamp program. And as I mentioned, there are numerous states in the United States that do require tax stamping of alcohol. And is there a problem? I don't know if there's a problem. Like I said, I know what I pay in taxes. I don't have access to what the government collects on an overall basis or on a monthly basis. But I have had the experience of walking into a store and seeing a 1 liter bottle of vodka on sale, retail, mind you, for $3.50, when I know that the alcohol tax on a liter of alcohol, on a liter of spirits, vodka, is something like $3.60, $3.70, $3.70. And yet they're retailing it at this store below the tax that should have gone to the government. And that includes the cost of the product, the cost of shipping, the taxes, and their profit, all for less than what is being paid, for the taxes. And I mentioned that to people. I've been mentioning that to people for years because it's gone on for years. And I mentioned it to several senators years back, and apparently it just wasn't sexy enough to pursue. So yes, we do have a problem with alcohol taxes. And yes, I think that could be resolved by using a tax stamp program for alcohol as well.
So you're saying not just do it for cigarette stamps, but do it for alcohol?
If you want to collect more taxes, yes.
Yeah. No, it's not that it's supposed to be taxes that are already assessed. Am I right?
if you want to collect your legally due taxes as provided under current law, yes, we should collect 100% of everything that is legally due to the government of Guam.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Duenas. And I just want to say that, I believe that our people are paying their taxes, and based on the conversation today, I do hope, and I am hoping that the Department of Revenue and Taxation, the oversight chair on taxation, and also you, Mr. Chair, that as I see the numbers and the percentages that are in front of me, someone who owns, I guess, 50% of the market is paying 80% of the taxes collected. And I just want to say, as we look at the numbers that have been escaping our government, that is actual audit numbers, I think that we need to do, I guess, right by our people. We got a hospital to fix. We need to make sure that the maintenance of effort for DOE is there. We need to provide for our education, our welfare, and our health. And I just think that this was a way that we could do it by doing it right. And as oversight chair of OPA, this audit came my way, and this is why the efforts of this bill was introduced, was because $10 to $15 million is a lot of money that we could utilize as policymakers to help our government, and we can literally solve a lot of issues that are from taking care of our menamco, our those who are homeless, those who mothers and children who are being abused, and foster care, and I'm going to look for money any which way. And this may not be an easy choice, and there may be a lot of people out there that may not like me for this, but I'm just looking at the numbers as provided to me at OPA. So I'm asking my colleagues to literally consider this, Mr. Chair. Look at the evidence as presented to us and see how we can move, because I truly think that maybe even through some kind of public-private partnership, working closely with our government entity, that there could be a positive move to make this bill work for everybody, and make sure that the taxes that have already been paid by the consumers out there, that is actually brought to light in fairness, and that the money shows within the government that it's being paid for. So thank you, and I hope you give me an opportunity to close. And thank you. And let's fix what the auditor is saying is escaping our government, $10 to $15 million. I'm going to stress that until we can get that money.
Yes,
Thank you,
ma'am. Thank you, Speaker. And I'd like to, Madam Speaker, and to my colleagues and to the people of Guam that are watching this, I'd like to also agree with Mr. Ricardo Duenas when we're talking about alcohol. And the reason for I say that is because when I was working in compliance and we were checking out the bars, we can identify specific alcohol that's sold from our local vendors and alcohol that's not sold by local vendors. That I know for a fact. I've seen it from the Chivas bottle to the vodka and a variety of different brands, and we were able to confiscate them, and we were able to find the vendors and so forth. But the stamp may be appropriate, and I agree with Ms. Ricardo on that one. That maybe that'd be another form of preventing, and unfortunately it happened to be for some that may not know that underneath even the Budweiser or your beer beverage, there is a code that's underneath that tells you where that beer came from. Was it the West Coast, East Coast? It'll actually tell you in certain liquor where it came from Asia or it came from the mainland. There's a variety of codes that many people don't realize, but revenue and tax are supposed to have a hold of that one. And I know Art probably sits back like, yep, that's something we're aware of. But I leave that alone, and I agree with the stamp. Before I get to Senator Amanda, I'd like the co-sponsor first. Senator Pito, to please, if you have any questions, sir, you'd like to pose. Then
Thank you very much. I just want to say that, we cannot do away with to monitor the bonding warehouse. That's what I can say right now. And I would like to ask two questions, and I don't know who can answer this. What is the percentage of the cigarette market does every company have? I don't know who can answer that. But that's my question. What percentage of the cigarette market does each company have?
Michelle, would you like that? Could you be able to answer that, or you don't have that information right now from Revenue and Tax?
Even if I had the information, I don't think I can disclose that information,
No.
Senator.
You won't be able to, because that's part of the federal disclosure.
Yeah.
We're just fortunate that Ricardo presented his.
I understand it. I understand it, Michelle. And also the other question that I wanted to ask, Mr. Chair, if you can let me, the
Yes,
amount
please.
of tax each company is paying. And I know that's also cannot be answered, but maybe later on I can talk to Michelle and maybe she can give me that answer personally.
No, she won't be able to because of the federal disclosure. But Mr. Ricardo, you had something you wanted to comment, sir? If you wanted to say something in reference to, you declared that you pay 55% of the market on cigarette. Am I correct, sir?
Yeah, so this is in response to Senator Terlahi's question about what's market share? What's market share for certain distributors or wholesalers in Guam? And unfortunately, here in Guam, we don't have very good market research capabilities. I would like to know what everyone's share of the market is. And back in the United States, they would hire a marketing research firm and they would go out there and they would do surveys and they would come back and it would cost a lot of money. We do it. We try to do it ourselves. We have relationships with our customers. So when we go in and we ask the customers, what's selling, what's not selling, what's a hot item, what's the cold item. We walk into a store or to a gas station and you've seen them, they have those big cigarette displays behind the counter with all kinds of cigarettes on it. And we look at it and we say, that's my cigarette, that's my cigarette. Okay, I control about 40 to 50% of this rack. And my competitors control this much of this rack and this much of this rack and this much of this rack. And I know that gas stations and some of the larger stores are very meticulous about slow moving inventory. So they will not put excess stock on display because that's money sleeping. They will stock what moves. And so if they're putting 50% of my cigarettes on the rack, then I know that that 50% of my cigarettes, those are my cigarettes, they're moving. Because if they weren't moving, they would tell me to take it off the rack because it's not moving, and they don't want to spend the money. And I look at my competitors and I see, okay, there's 40%, there's 20%, there's 10%. So in my mind, I'm saying, okay, my little tomorrow market research says that I own maybe 50% of the market, and that's how we come to it. I don't know how my competitors come to it, but if I were to base it on revenue collection by revenue and taxation, then for August, apparently I own 80% of the market.
Okay, Senator Pito. Sir.
I also want to just echo Art's testimony because there's some things there that we should understand. You know, he was the director for revenue and tax for 40 years, so I think he knows what to do and what not to do. And I just want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to ask my questions.
Thank you,
Can
sir.
I make a correction there, sir? I was only director for 8 years. I worked there for 40 years, or close to 40
Well,
years.
it's the same. You get the experience of 40 years and you've been the director for so many years. Thank you. Thank you, Art.
No, but Art's been there a long time. I left there in '84 and he was still there. But Art, you've been there a long time. 40 years is good. It's good.
I started with Michelle. Michelle. We went to school together.
I
We went
know.
to revenue agent training together.
Yes,
That's good,
that's
Art,
right.
because you're getting your 85% retirement, right?
Yeah, something like that.
All right. Senator Amanda, you have any question for the folks? We have Michelle from Revenue and Tax, Ricardo from Wesco, and Art as a former director.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And obviously, there's a lot of expertise in the room. So, Sujus Masi to the panel for being here today. Mr. Dueñas, there was some mention about from you about the black market tobacco and liquor. And so, I just want to be very clear about what this is. When you refer to the black market, you mean anything that's sold that's untaxed. Is that correct? I mean, it could come in very well on a legal and inspected cargo shipment. At a port or at the airport, and it could still be considered black market goods.
That's correct. That's my definition of black market. I mean, it's contraband. If the taxes have not been paid, it may be real cigarettes. It may not be counterfeit cigarettes. It may be truly a pack of ABC cigarettes that came from the AB factory and was brought in by the ABC wholesaler or distributor. But it boils down to that once the tax has not been paid, then it's contraband. It becomes black market.
Yeah, I think that really just shines a light here that we still have these gaps in the enforcement of the law. So I do appreciate what the authors of this legislation are trying to accomplish here and thinking a little bit creatively to help us find a solution here to get the rules and regs up and to see this through, this process through to ensure that we're collecting every single tax dollar that's owed to the government of Guam. I mean, if anyone was following along with our budget session and just hearing how much money we're going to be out in the next fiscal year, I mean, I'm sure you can understand that how sought after these monies really are right now. And you mentioned something interesting towards the bottom of your testimony, the end of your testimony, about the potential for customs and quarantine, the location for the offloading. If you can just expand on that, because it was just a really short paragraph that I read in your testimony, if you can kind of explain that for us today and what potential possibilities there are with that partnership.
Well, when we initially looked at the speaker's bill regarding the tax stamp, we knew when we read through it, we knew that tax stamp is important, but also it needs to work with bonded warehousing. And the difficulty was if you're doing tax stamping and you're going to be doing it at 4 different bonded warehouses, which means you're going to have 4 different machines, or is everyone going to bring it to one area? And I tried to look around, and I think years ago, Hawaii may have had, although I have not been able to confirm it, that cigarettes were kept in a central bond. And I found that very interesting. It's like, well, if it's kept in a central bond and it's stamped at a central bond by either the government or a third party, if you have this bonded, now you have this bonded warehouse. What other things could we use that bonded warehouse for? If it's a centralized bonded warehouse, what could we use it for? Because back in the States, there are a number of privately run bonded warehouses that importers and exporters have to go through, and they have to pay a fee to use. But if we had a bonded warehouse here in Guam, that we had a centralized area for cigarettes to be stamped, how else could we use that? We could also use it for alcohol. We could also use it for customs and quarantine, because customs and quarantine they've been crying for years. They need a modern, dedicated customs facility to do their inspections. Well, you're going to need, in every bonded warehouse back in the States, you have a customs officer on duty. You should have a taxation officer on duty as well to monitor everything that goes in and out. Even though it's privately run, it still has to be monitored by those government entities. So if you now have a centralized warehouse and you're paying this operator to develop it, then why not use some of that to pay him to develop a larger facility that could provide services for customs and quarantine. So they now have a warehouse that they could acquire on a build, operate, transfer scheme that's going to be built from the part of the money from perhaps is 12%. And then they could have greater interdiction of drugs and other contraband and have more increased space for their inspections. And then there's always been talk about trying to expand into new industries. And One of the industries that has been looked at in prior years is using Guam as a pre-clearance port for goods going from Asia into the United States. And the reason for that is because during certain times of the year, the backlog of shipments going from Asia into the West Coast is so long that they don't have enough manpower or enough space to process all the incoming shipments to get out to Target or Walmart to get all those goods in. And this was also quite evident after 9/11 when security really tightened up. There was a bottleneck at the West Coast. So the theory was, and this is not my idea, this was actually brought up by several people in Guam Customs years and years ago, that if Guam could come up with a memorandum of understanding with U.S. Customs and Border Patrol to utilize Guam as a pre-clearance port, either air shipments or sea shipments, they come into Guam, it comes into our bonded warehouse and is inspected and pre-cleared by U.S. Customs and Border Control, so that when it ships back out and hits the West Coast, it's already been cleared. It doesn't have to be stopped. It goes straight through and it gets out into the market faster. And that's something, I mean, they do that. And when I was at the airport, on the board of the airport, it was my understanding that they were doing such pre-clearance of travelers in in Japan. So in Japan, you could go and see U.S. Customs and Border Control and get pre-cleared, so that when you went through Guam or Hawaii, you didn't have to go through customs again because you've been pre-cleared. They've already stamped your book and everything else. So why not air and sea shipments? And a bonded warehouse dovetails right into that and creates a new industry. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that does really actually. There sounds like there's a lot of potential there to save money and to capture a lot of taxes that way. And obviously, that's for a greater discussion down the line for us. But I think I can recognize here the concerns in the bill that, logistically, this is a process that's very difficult. And obviously the department has not had the resources to move forward and to develop the rules and regs on their own. And we're here today to, see these potential rules and discuss these. Something that was a little bit of a red flag for me was the question about the 12% cap for this third party to charge us based on what we're bringing in, what we're collecting on the taxes. Mr. Chair, if I can just ask the panel who's here before us what their thoughts are on that 12%. I mean, I know that we're not all in agreement here to have this third party do the work for us, but if we were to remove that 12% cap and put out an RFP on our own and let that cost come about organically and hopefully get the best cost from a company who's able to give us the services that we need at the best cost they're able to do it. Is that something that we could compromise on here today?
I think everything can be looked at and discussed. My concern is revenue tax and funding and their issues, not just ABC, but all the branches. I mean, it's a place where everybody goes to. And when it closes down for one day, the next day it's really crowded. So when the department, or you're going to make the people work harder to accommodate double the work that's needed the next day. It goes the same with ABC. I mean, they have a lot of duties. They have other things. They have the poker machines. They have all those licenses to issue, to inspect. The ABC, the bars, how can 5 people do all that and then come up with a stamp tax regulations? It's really underfunded. You really need to look at funding revenue tax the way it should be funded if you want services to be proper, lines to be shorter, and people to be served.
Okay.
Mr.
Cheryl or Ricardo?
Mr.
Yes,
Chair, I mean, I agree with Art. The fact is that revenue tax has been chronically underfunded for years, which boggles my mind because revenue and taxation is the engine that collects the money to fund all operations of the government. Without them, things would grind to a halt. So it always boggled my mind that why aren't they getting adequate funding? You know, they're a crucial part of this government equation. But let me ask you a question. Would you spend $1 to make $10? Everyone's going to say yes. I will spend $1 if I knew I was going to get $10 back. Would you spend 12%? Doesn't have to be 12%, could be lower as the senator has mentioned. Would you spend that money to get that extra $10 to $15 million each year? Could any of that $10 to $15 million after collection, could any of that be used to supplement additional bodies over at revenue and taxation? I think Art mentioned, or Michelle had mentioned, that within ABC, the compliance department, they have maybe 6 staff, which represents a budget of about $300,000. If you were to double that to $600,000, that's still only what, 2% of the $10 to $15 million? So would you spend that to get twice as many staff people at ABC compliance? I think the answer universally would be yes. It doesn't make sense to say I'm overworked and I'm understaffed and I'm underfunded. Therefore, my answer is to just stop doing anything. The answer is we need to work smarter, use the technology, and optimize tax collections. By doing all of those things, you grow the pool. You now have a bigger bucket that you can split, and the hospital can get their money, and revenue and taxation can get additional funding. Potentially, customs can get a facility. I mean, once we start talking about getting $10 to $15 million every year additional, think of the things that you can do with that money. And as I mentioned, the 12% could be on a sliding scale. I would agree with every senator that why would I pay you 12% to collect money that I'm already collecting? Well, perhaps we're going to pay you a smaller rate to collect the money we're already collecting. And if we see collections go up and you do a good job getting those increased collections, then perhaps you'll get paid more. It shouldn't be, I agree with you, it shouldn't be a flat for 12%. It should be a graduated based on performance. It should be graduated based on new collections so that there's an incentive to collect more. And when you have a private operator in there, they're profit driven. They have a profit motive. They want to hit that high target because they know they're going to get paid more. With a government entity, they're going to get paid anyway. So there's really no profit motive incentive for them to do better.
Thank you, Mr. Ricardo. Does anybody else, Michelle, do you have anything you want to mention to that? So we can wrap up Senator Mendes' question.
No, I agree with, Rick Duenas. My ABC team is, I mean, what, there are 5-6 people and they're charged with doing a lot of things. I agree that Rev tax is always underfunded. Our budgets are always underfunded. We would love to move forward technologically. This year, it took us over 6 months to procure 80 computers. There's over 160 employees here, and everybody's computer is ready to die. It's things like that we go through. And we're hoping to procure another 80. I don't know how we're going to do that with, they cut our budget, to the tune of $475,000. But, we're trying, and I agree with what everybody's saying. It's just that we can only do so much with the resources we have. But I can tell you that we work and we're trying to be innovative and we're trying to work smart. But it's just hard, and it's hard with everything. So, but I agree with Art. I agree with Rick. Thank you.
All right, Senator Amanda, you have anything else to follow up? Because I see the speaker waving her hand.
Oh, thank you. No follow-up. I do appreciate the answers from across the board here today. And the thinking for everyone, getting the wheels turning to see how we can best follow the mandate that was passed by a legislature before us and enacted into law, how we can best follow the law and help give Rev Tax the support that they need to carry out this law and bring in the most money for our government, so that we can fund all of the things that are very important to us, all of the things that are our priority. So I appreciate all the contributions today and the ideas here. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Madam Speaker, you're waving your hand. Did you want to say something so we can move on to the next senator? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted a follow-up question to the deputy of Rev Tax based on her statement. If Rev Tax had to do it and had to set this program up tomorrow so that we can realize $10 to $15 million, how much would it cost specifically? And I don't know if she mentioned it earlier. I just wanted to get a confirmation from her. What are we looking at as far as the dollar amount?
Well, initially, I believe that they estimated to the tune of 302,000. That was a couple years ago. Probably if we update that, it would be probably under 400,000. Before we met today at 2:00, we talked to the Attorney General, and Fred Nishihira has done some work with Craig Camacho in Hawaii, visiting and studying their system, how they do the cigarette stamp tax. And the AG mentioned that they're willing to share funding of 60 to 70,000 to initiate the purchase of stamps. And we estimate that we can, with the 60,000, we can purchase stamps for 2 years, to get us going for 2 years, based on the calculations we've come up with. So that's a start. But they did initially come up with $302,000, and that was a couple of years ago. So maybe that's upped a little bit. So I would say 450,000.
So that would be 450,000 inclusive of the cigarette stamp machine and the employees and the processing time and all that?
Yes, I believe so. I can provide that analysis to you. I don't have it in front of me right now, but I remember looking at it earlier, and that was the amount. It included labor and machines. And the way Hawaii does it, they have a vendor. That vendor provides the stamps and also provides the machine, whether the wholesaler wants to rent it or buy it, they provide it. And they also provide training on how to use the machines to affix the stamps so that there's not a lot of waste with the stamps, right? Because that's what we don't want, is to waste those stamps. So we did talk with the AG about that earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason why I brought that up was because I wanted to make sure that based on the realization of the need of anywhere between 332,000 to 400 plus, and maybe if we even add in several $100,000 for the full manpower, that would be something that we could consider and try and implement right away, because the law is existing today, but it has not materialized in the last 3 years, and I just wanted to see what we can do to help the agency of Rev and Tax, and I want to help them. So I want to
You
give
know,
them the
yeah, we, since I've been here, which is going on almost the end of 2 years, we couldn't do much with our budget. I know the first year we had to put a freeze on hiring because we would have run in the red. And this year we have not done too much other than our biggest expenditure, which was, you know, quite out of the ordinary, was the 80 computers. So, you know, we run our, we're very frugal with our budget. So, you know, finding that extra money just to implement the tobacco, you know, was not we technical, we needed to buy those computers. We needed to, you know, everything we do here is with a computer. And if we don't have that and it starts to die on us, we are very, very, very handicapped.
Okay,
so, Mr.
okay,
Thank
all right.
Mr. Chair, I think it's important that I, you know, this, I haven't heard this part until now, and I just want, I don't know why it wasn't brought up during our budget hearings and during the public hearings for the budget, but I think it was really important that now that we know that this is happening, then, you know, how do we move forward and facilitate to try and recoup 10 to 15 million dollars that's been escaping our government, and giving Rev and Taxes the resources they need so that they can do this program, whether it be through a public-private partnership or be through the government of Guam, Rev and Tax, doing it themselves, because that is a lot of money that the Healthy Future Funds can give to the different programs, to health, welfare, and education.
All right, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
We're gonna try to move on real quick because we only got about 20 more minutes left, and then we're gonna wrap this one up on this bill because we got another bill, but I'll probably delay the other bill. But a little bit of history, my colleagues. 2 years ago, Revenue and Tax, you weren't there, Michelle, neither was Daphne. 2 years ago, the department received $1.4 million, and Senator Reese was with me on last term, $1.4 million to hire people. What they failed to do was hire people. Okay, so we're not going to discuss that because that's 2 years ago. And then if you want to talk about computers, you know, Madam Deputy Director, thank you for mentioning that you're looking for money. There's $6 million in CARES to buy your technology upgraded Revenue and Tax. So I would just hold back just a little bit. Let's move along with this bill and let's get this back on track, because I know that the vendors, and when we talk about recouping 10 to 15 million dollars, it was quite clear by Mr. Duenas that if it's contraband, it's considered confiscated. There's no tax money when you confiscate something. When you confiscate it, it becomes destroyed item. It's like alcohol and tobacco. It goes to the court, it gets destroyed. And I will verify that because that's how we do it at ABC. It goes through the process of being confiscated, destroyed, and it's gone. There's no money in that. Trying to catch the people that are bringing in something and tax them and penalize them, that's would be one of the keys that would bring in money. And
Yes.
tobacco stamp sounds great, and so does the alcohol. So we'll move on. Senator Luis Muna, do you have any questions? And then we'll move to Senator Therese and then Senator Kelly.
No, at this point, Mr. Chair, a lot of my questions have already been answered. Still processing a lot of the information, and I guess maybe just trying to realize if maybe the whole idea of this is to just have a fair playing field, I guess, in as far as taxes being paid. And just taking in some of the information the Department of Revenue and Taxation is providing with their testimony as well too. But I could see, I think my problem would probably be using some of the Healthy Futures funds, the elimination of some of the Healthy Futures funds to provide this to program. That's my problem at this point. But like Mr. Duenas said, that, you know, putting in a little bit will get us a lot more. So, you know, I'm looking beyond that. But at this point, can we afford that little bit at this point right now? You know, so I'm just trying to weigh it out and make sure that that it's not going to affect us in the immediate in the present, because we know it's gonna benefit us in the future. But at this point, where are we at now, and how will it affect us at this point? So I'm still processing, but thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Louise. Senator Therese, and you'll be followed by Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks to all of those who presented testimony today. If I could just start with the Department of Revenue and Taxation. So of course, it's frustrating for all of us that this stamp that was supposed to help us to collect the taxes that the auditor says are not being collected, that this program's not been implemented. But I think it's unfair to say that, Rev and Tax has done nothing about it, because I know that we talked to them about this in June 2019 at a roundtable, and we asked them what is the delay in the stamps, and their response at that time and today included that they were seeking clarification with the Attorney General's office about whether it was a double tax or not. And then in the FY 2020 budget hearing, we asked again, what is the delay with the stamp tax? And they advised that the two main barriers were that it was unfunded, and they weren't sure who would bear the cost of the machine. And they were working to prioritize tax collections at all levels. And she discussed that she had not yet contemplated the supplemental budget request for the cost to implement this program. But from day one, when the bill in the 34th Guam legislature was being discussed, Revenue and Taxation came out and said that it would cost them between at least $300,000, I think they said, to implement this program. And that was, like they said, ignored at the time. And so I don't think there was any specific appropriation made for this program, but I guess we all hoped that you would be able to, at least write the rules and regs, and then if you needed funding, that there would be a request. So I guess I want to ask, because it's been some time and we're hearing it again today, Reverend Tax, if you could just tell us, so what is the AG's opinion in regards to the double taxation or not?
The AG provided an information and guidance paper, and they said it wasn't not double taxation.
All right.
Okay.
And did they say it was proper for us to allow a vendor to collect the taxes for the government of Guam?
They didn't address that. We just simply asked that one question.
Okay. All right. Can you tell us why the estimate is different now from $300,000 to $400,000? Is there something that we didn't know back then?
Only because the price of everything has gone up. I'm just estimating that would probably cost us a little bit more money than the $300,000, Senator.
Okay.
Another reason we don't write rules and regs is we have no lawyer. We have no attorney. We've been trying to hire an attorney because we're allowed to by law. But, we've just not had any takers. We've been actively seeking, for an attorney to work here. And we've just reached dead ends when it will follow up on the lead and nothing becomes of it. So that's another reason we have not, we're swamped, and we don't have anybody to research it and write the rules and regs and have somebody check it.
All right. I know that we've been through this before also, and it's very difficult to recruit a tax attorney, but to recruit a regular attorney should not be that difficult. And also, I remember discussions for several years now with the Attorney General's office that they are assisting you, aren't they? And
yes.
You had provided specifically for that at one point, not at this most recent budget, but in prior budgets, so that you could have counsel. Are they able to assist you in drafting the rules and regulations that you think you need?
I suppose they are. We've never really, uh, uh, I'm not sure that we've ever really asked them, Senator. It could be that Daphne's asked them, but I know, after today's meeting, they agreed to assist us. They agreed to assist us, help write the RFP. But they've agreed
I
to us,
think-
to help us, yeah.
Yeah, from all indications on my end, because I've also heard from Attorney Nishihira that this is something they are, willing to assist with. So
Yes,
I
yes,
hope that this can get completed.
yes.
There are different estimates of, taxes that could be brought in if this stamp tax or this stamp program was implemented. We've heard today that 10 million is being talked about. But I think I'm wondering if your records versus customs records, if you notice anything different, like is there another amount that you estimate would come in if we were able to track it better?
Senator, I'm not uh, prepared to answer that. I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer. It's not something we looked into while preparing for today. It's very possible that the numbers could be different. It's something we'd have to look into. We have met on several occasions with customs to how to better our handling of the use tax, taxing what comes in, and but we've just they have their own problems, we have our own problems. I know Daphne took a trip to Saipan to study their customs office, and even the way they're organized in terms of their department, is different from how we are organized. But what makes it easier for them to collect their taxes is that customs falls under the Department of Finance, which, and we brought that up with the governor. Would you ever consider reorganizing? That's another way to, reorganizing so that if you want to call rev and tax, the Department of Finance would, a long time ago that thought has always been brought up to have customs come under rev and tax, but it's not like we have not enough to do, but it's just the situation. And but that was thought of, and we brought it up to the governor. You might consider reorganizing so that that it can flow better and we can collect the taxes easier.
I'm going to admit that just doesn't sit well with me, that we need to reorganize the government to get these government agencies to work efficiently, work together.
Yes, I agree with you. It's just
implement rules and regulations to help each other write them, or to do all those things. But so the auditor had said that one of the issues was DRT, while it has implemented controls since the audit, but personnel was not trained to properly monitor the bonded warehouse accountability. What controls have been implemented and efforts have been made to mitigate this underreporting of the taxes at the bonded warehouses to date?
Well,
without stamps.
I'm sorry?
Without the
Without?
stamps, yeah.
Oh, okay. As it is, we have a representative from tax and a representative from compliance we go out in pairs, and they monitor the what's being pulled. They physically help with accounting and take, like an inventory. Then it comes back to our branches and then it's reported and they keep track of it, and monitored, they monitor it with the GRT form.
Is that sufficient? Do you think then that you're now collecting everything that should be collected?
I think so. I think that's with what we have, that's the only way we can do it. Minus, probably formal training, but I don't know where we'd get that unless we lean on another state for assistance. If they do it the same way we do it.
Okay. Could I ask, who at well, is there anyone at Revenue and Taxation who's assigned to write the rules and regulations at this point?
No, not right now.
All right. And when you reviewed this bill, did the AG tell you whether this bill, the rules and regs that would be adopted pursuant to this bill are consistent with the public law that was adopted in the 34th for the tax stamp?
I'm not sure that they reviewed the bill and reviewed the rules and regs in this bill, and whether they compared it. Our conversation this afternoon was brief, and our request on the double taxation didn't include any part of this. So, yeah.
All right. And so I have several questions in regards to the bill itself, and I'll ask them to Reverend Tax and maybe Mr. Duenas or Mr. Logan, if he's still here. Oh, yes, thanks. If he could join in. First of all, there are certain rules that are being adopted, but these rules were not specifically authorized in the existing law. And I'm just wondering if the laws, well, maybe we'll take that up with legal. I'm just going to let that question lie. But the next question is, so this bill proposes that Revenue and Taxation is going to issue an RFP, but the RFP, I want to know why an RFP, not an IFB, an invitation for bid, or why are we going with a request for proposals? What are we anticipating that we need to, why not go with the cheapest bidder, in other words?
I'm not sure. I didn't draft the legislation. I'm not sure why that was. It was an RFP and not an IFB, invitation to bid. The way I look at RFPs, 2 envelopes are submitted, your proposal on the scope of services, and then another envelope would be your price. And the way we'd handle that is we'd look at the proposers and see who's the qualified, and then look at the price and then negotiate from there. But with an invitation to bid, I think everybody just submits, yeah, you're right, the cheapest bidders. I would imagine we'd have to look at their qualifications as well and whether they can handle a job. I think by just looking at the cheapest bidder, we're maybe overlooking that part of the equation, their qualifications.
All right. Well, it's interesting because in addition to providing stamps, yeah, this bill's proposing that they do the collections, they do the
Enforcement.
Yes, enforcement, and even
Rules and
I think
regs.
the rules and regulations is something that you pointed out in your testimony. Yeah, and so I agree, though we need to be very careful how we're going to do that if we're really going to get value out of it. The other question, the same provision, which is 21A03, it says that they either issue an RFP or that Revenue and Taxation contract with a local company to provide the stamps. Are there any local companies currently licensed to be stamp providers? How many of those companies exist right now?
I don't know that there's any. I don't know that there's any. I know that. Yeah, I know that. I know that First Hawaiian Bank in Honolulu provides it for the Attorney General's office there for their tobacco stamp program. And we do have a First Hawaiian Bank here. But there,
All right, I was
that,
wondering,
that
any
contract,
printing,
that I don't know. I don't know of any printing company that would provide the stamps.
well, I wanted to ask if a printing company is what we're looking for. If we're looking for something broader than that, Mr. Duenas, I guess if.
Yeah, I'm unmuted here. I don't believe there are any local companies that would produce stamps for a tax stamp program. They're,
Okay.
they're actually quite sophisticated in their manufacture. And in fact, I forget the name of the company, but there is a international company that produces a number of different types of stamps for probably 80 or 90% of the countries and states and territories that use tax stamps. And like I said, they're quite sophisticated because there are different levels of stamps that you can use apparently. Some of them are simple heat attachments. Some of them have chips in it that you can read data using a point gun at the point of sale. So no, I don't believe there is anyone that locally now regarding First Hawaiian Bank. First Hawaiian Bank, I believe, had a contract with Hawaii to provide for the sale collection of the tax stamps. Similar in California and in many of the other states, a private vendor is used to sell the stamps to the wholesalers and distributors. So there is precedent in many territories where a private vendor is responsible for selling and collecting the tax and then reconciling that and remitting it to the government. But
All
First Hawaiian Bank is not producing the stamps. There's another company that does that.
All right, then that would make much more sense for maybe, we just need an IFB to procure the stamps from a vendor that, in the specs that we need, and then an RFP for services for if we're going to go with this collection separate. But right now the bill says issuing a request for proposal to a local company to procure stamps to be sold. And then another section again, it's very specific. It's that this shall be sold in rolls of, and then it gives the amount of per sheet, or sheets with a minimum of this amount, or and then it gives a minimum order. And I was wondering why we gave those specific types of specifications for this stamp company. And I just thought maybe, that's going to preclude us also from getting the best value on it. It doesn't. Are you aware, Mr. Duenas, of any reason why we would be that specific in how the stamps are going to be issued, sold, or bought?
No, I don't, and I agree with you. It kind of fences us in to a specific requirement. I think the law should be written that to provide adequate and appropriate stamps to be produced and procured. To say that it needs to be done in a certain denomination or numbers or rolls or everything else, I think that should be left to the experts with the vendors that you're going to be dealing with, the ones who are actually going to be producing it, because they're going to be able to bring that expertise to the table and say, well, this is how it's done here, and this is how it's done in California. This is how it's done in the Philippines, and based on our experience, this is the best way it should be done. So I don't know why I'm not sure why it would be like that. I think we should rely on the expertise of the vendor that we're going to contract with.
All right, I thank you. I also found this International Organization for Standards, ISO, that issued a document entitled Security and Resilience, Authenticity, Integrity, and Trust for Products and Documents, Guidelines for the Content, Security, Issuance, and Examination of Excise Tax Stamps. And I wondered if Revenue and Taxation had looked at that in their attempts to implement this program? It
No,
seems
but-
to be our goal to walk governments or entities through implementation of this type of a program.
That would be something we would look at because we want to make sure that the stamps can't be duplicated and there are some security measures like a watermark or something that would make it, specific to our purpose and only for rev tax. And it can, you can tell if there's some deviation or some counterfeit,
Right.
so to speak. Yeah.
Okay. And Mr. Dueñas, would you agree that those standards are something revenue and taxation should look at?
Absolutely. I mean, as I said, we're not reinventing the wheel. There's resources out there throughout the world and throughout the United States, and we should leverage
Did you
that
get
experience
organization?
to be implemented here in Guam. And
This is a.
ideally, if we were to go with a third party, we would be leveraging their experience and their expertise.
Do you have a
They
vendor?
would come to the table with these items,
do?
with this information. So yes, I agree that Revenue Tax should look at that, and they should use that guidance in deciding whether if they go with a third party vendor, that what standards should they be adhering to, and what questions should they be asking proposers.
Correct. Okay, thanks. So again, for revenue and taxation, is it possible for revenue and taxation to know the market shares for tobacco or for cigarettes?
I guess based on what taxes are paid, would be easy to figure out, but I'm not at liberty to say what's paid and who paid it because of our
Well,
disclosure.
the allegation is that payment of taxes is not equal to market shares at this point, that there are items on the market that taxes are not being paid on. So how would revenue and taxation verify something like that?
Well, we don't normally look at market share, ma'am.
Well, what is revenue and taxation's position on that there are items being sold that are not being taxed? Either black market items or that they're getting out of the warehouses without oversight of revenue and taxation, they're not being accounted for. It's one of the two, it sounds to me, unless they're being, smuggled out from the port without even getting to the warehouses. I guess that's the black market scene, Mr. Dueñas.
Yes,
So,
yes.
Yeah. So what is your position on that? Do you agree that there is that type of marketing going on or not? And are you
We
able
believe-
to remember what that might be?
We believe that that exists. However, we've not attempted to determine what percentage that it does exist. My compliance team is only a 5-man team. They're all over the place as it is.
When
Yeah.
retailers pay their GRTs, do they have to separately account for sales of cigarettes? No.
No, not retailers.
All
I
right.
don't believe so. Yeah.
Okay, and I know I've asked a lot of questions, Mr. Chair, so just one more to Mr. Dueñas. Mr. Dueñas, would you still support the bill without your proposed amendment for the central bonded warehouse?
Yes, I think we would. I mean, I think really the ultimate goal at this point should be to stand up a tax stamp program, because many of the things that you refer to and the discussions that have gone on this afternoon, what's market share, how much taxes should be collected, and it all comes back to the fact that you can't monitor anything without a tax stamp. And so the ultimate goal, as it was back when the original legislation was enacted and should have been implemented, was that even though we had to spend that money, it's the tax stamp is the most crucial part of this equation right now. I mean, with having each wholesaler have their own bond, okay, that's fine. Without a centralized bond, that's fine. But ultimately, the implementation of the tax stamp program should be the goal. That should be the standard.
Thank you.
All right.
I would very much like to see the program implemented by Revenue and Taxation, so that any money, instead of paying fees for anyone else to do this, especially if we're talking about, $4 million, that Revenue and Taxation is going to keep, for the government, all of the, as much of the amounts made as possible. I believe they can do it if they prioritize it, because we've seen that happen, that if it was a priority of Revenue and Taxation, it would happen. And I believe that you have had the benefit of the resources, like Mr. Duenas discussed about the roundtables, because I remember asking them about this often. Like, are you guys following up? Are you help? I asked Mr. Duenas several times after that law was passed, are you guys helping them help Rev and Tax? Otherwise, we're gonna, we don't want to wait forever for this thing. We need your help to help them. So they did have their stakeholder meetings. I think, if you've got experts in Hawaii who are helping you and the AG is willing to help, then we really need to move on it. And Mr. Logan, I really want to thank you for your testimony. I think I agree with you. Revenue and Taxation can do this. They need to prioritize it. We need to ensure that they have the staff enough to do what they need to do after the program is set up. I think they can set this program up, soon. I think especially with the Attorney General's help. But I especially appreciated your testimony, Mr. Logan, regarding, the Code of Ethics for Government Employees, and how you and how we do put a lot of pressure on Revenue and Taxation employees. And if they're underpaid, then it's just like law enforcement. They will be, tempted to go astray if we cannot take care of our employees, and we need to do that. So it's a whole system that we need to help. And so hopefully, we can get this soon. I just don't want to see a bill though, Mr. Chair, that tries to, write specs that are so narrow that, we only go with one company, or that, gives Revenue and Taxation only a few days to implement this, when they've told us it's complex. But I do think they should prioritize it. I'm not saying they should, let this go any longer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Kelly, do you have any questions? And you'll be followed by Senator Sabina. And we've only got so many minutes left. I already asked the author of the other bill that's going to be heard. We'll follow immediately. So hopefully not a lot of questions left. Senator Kelly, do you have any questions?
Yes, and I'll keep this brief. We've covered some good detail. And so I appreciate everybody weighing in and us being able to hear from everyone's perspective and experience. And so I've been weighing in my mind, and I do want to go over the numbers again and more thoroughly, this sort of risk assessment as to what we're looking at. With the RFP, and I did come in late from another meeting, so I apologize if I missed it. With this possible RFP, if that's the direction we do go in, is part of the RFP to determine the length of time? Is this just for 1 year of service? I didn't really catch that in the bill.
It would depend on the terms of the contract. Once the RFP is awarded, how long, most contracts with RFPs, they're 3 years, based on the availability of funds, right? As always, right? Yes.
Okay, so with the 3 year, because part of what I've been weighing out in my mind as well, and I know that there are other entities that have done this, that perhaps get this boost, but then also put into the bid terms for some sort of transition to public management. And so I'm just trying to weigh out in my mind if that's something that could be possible, but that, we really need this boost at the front end that gets rules and regulations and other things into place. And if that might be something to consider, that it gives hopefully more money coming in so that DRT can build itself up, and at the same time, it can be learning how to take over some of this later on down the line. So that's something, like I said, I just wanted to be able to think through a little bit more. The one question that I have is there's quite a lot here that's added to the way that dealing with the tobacco has been dealt with in the past. So if somebody could explain to me, is there any difference in the way that tobacco products leaving the territory would be handled? Is there any additional tax that would occur for those that's not occurring now? If somebody could speak to that, to outlay those differences.
Well, Senator, those tobacco products that are exported, they're exempted. No taxes are paid on those in exports.
Okay, so all exports, if they go down to Palau or over to another neighboring island, okay, because in the way that it was written, that wasn't real clear if maybe there was going to be a difference in the way that they're going to be treated now. So I wanted to verify that things would be staying the same and there wouldn't be any changes to the practices. So that's your assessment, that there is no change to that practice.
Yes, there would be no stamp tax on those items being exported.
Okay, like I said, there's a lot of new sections here, and so it didn't seem to be crossing out old sections. So all of those new sections, I wanted to make sure that they weren't putting something into place that we weren't considering thoroughly. So yeah, we've covered other things very well. I'll just stop at those couple of points. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
All right,
Can I
thank
just
you, Senator Kelly. Senator Sabina, you have any questions? Art, you wanted to say something, Art? Because we're gonna wrap this up.
Yeah, I just want to make clear
I haven't
when,
spoken yet. This is Senator Tello.
Hold on, Senator Tello. You'll be able to speak. Just relax. Art, you had something to say? I will
Yes,
recognize you.
if we go back to a system where taxes are paid when it's landed, then you have to take into account how to credit those people, those vendors or wholesalers when those are exported, because they already paid the tax on it.
All right. Okay, thank you. Senator Sabina, you have any questions you wanted to pose on the panel?
Yes, thank you,
Then be
Mr.
followed by
Chair.
Senator Tello.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and as Oversight Chair of Department of Revenue and Taxation, I've worked with the Department of Revenue and Taxation to try to get this program running. And, we reached out to assist them, even during the budget time of 2019. So thank you, Senator Therese, for bringing that up. We even requested for a supplemental budget. And we've talked to Craig too. We try to reach out to him to try to get this program up and running. And I do agree with Senator Therese Chalahi that, it's just a matter of prioritizing. Here we have two models, right? The public model or the privatized model. And, I think that, I truly believe that if we can do it if the government can do it, we can do it cheaper. And we can recoup more of the funds for our needed services. But we really need to kind of prioritize this within DRT. And, in studying this issue, looking at OPA audit regarding abolishing the bonded warehouse, I reached out to stakeholders regarding that. And, I think that it's more of a privilege, right? And privilege dependent upon whether their taxes are being paid. And so that's something my office is working on in addition to what this tax stamp. So, but I do agree that tax stamps are critical. It's one of the key things. And, to abolish the bonded warehouse would be a mistake if, we don't have this tax stamps up and running. I think that's really critical. And we need to get this working, with prioritizing this. But in regards to looking at the bill, so as far as procurement goes, so, in the many different public hearings that we've had, I've always brought up the question about, who is trained to do procurement within Department of Revenue and Taxation. And, to do an RFP, you need at least 3 people in the agency to do that. And the responses that I've had shows that there isn't enough staff to carry out an RFP. And then that's probably part of the reason why there's issues with procurement at Department of Revenue and Taxation. And I know Director Shimizu is trying to prioritize this too. As she said that she wanted to take these classes. The directors themselves have to take these courses in order to make these decisions at the RFP level. So yeah, there's some issues with the bill, and as far as implementation within a 45-day period, because in order to be able to carry out the RFP, you need to have taken and passed all 4 modules, and that is that's going to take more than 45 days. I'm sorry, did you want to speak, Michelle?
No, Senator, the director is taking those classes, and I've taken it not as a revenue and tax employee, but I've taken all 4 modules as a assistant executive director of the Guam Board of Accountancy, because they do their own procurement. So I was forced to take it because we do our own procurement. I can put together an RFP, and I've done it for legal services by myself. It doesn't take 3 people to do it, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel either. You can, like I'll ask retirement if they've ever done ones for a certain vendor, and they'll say yes, and I'll say, can I have a copy? So you can pretty much model it the same way, cut and paste, whatever. But it's not difficult. It's just, we have to make sure that we have the money to back it up. We have to certify the funds available. But I believe that's been the biggest hang up, not that we can't, effectuate the RFP.
Yeah, I think though you need the panel to be trained as well. So it's not just one individual.
Yes, I agree with you. That comes later when the RFP is, ready to be evaluated. You have the panel, and we have a sheet where you rate it, based on numerics. You give a certain number of points based on what their strengths and the weaknesses are of the proposer. Yeah. Yes, I agree with you on that.
Okay. The other thing I see is, the rules and regs seem a little bit, it definitely needs a lot of work. And I think before you start any program, it's a hard work, right? And that's something that we've come up against, is creating rules and regs for another part of this tobacco enforcement. It requires that expertise. And, this is something that we've talked about in the past regarding, utilizing the Attorney General's office. I mean, to kind of get through these rules and regs. And I believe there was an appropriation that was done in the initial introduction or passage of this legislation for tobacco stamps. And, like you said, the AG's office is willing to kind of put in some funds for this. So I do want to encourage you to pursue that and prioritize that, in getting those rules and regs, because I think how it's written now, it leaves it open to, there's a lot of things that have not been addressed. It goes into a lot of, what to do to reimburse for stamps that are damaged. And it's very thin as far as, the other angles and how to enforce these things. So that's some of the concerns I have with this bill. With the procurement aspect, are we getting the best value too? There's a lot of things that are written in this that kind of negate some of that. So I have some concerns, but in your statement, Deputy Director Santos, you were mentioning that you're willing to work to make this a reality. Can you clarify what are some of the things that, what is the action plan for this to get this up and running? So if, you stated that you're opposed to this, but what is the Department of Revenue and Taxation? What is the action plan to get the cigarette stamp functional?
Well, first of all, we'd have to do an RFP. and decide, yeah, you're right. The rules and regs probably have to be worked on and refined. Then we'd have to do an RFP, decide how extensive we're going to go with the procurement, whether it's going to be, as simple as getting a vendor, getting the vendor to sell the stamps, getting a vendor to sell the machines, to affix the stamps, and training the wholesalers who buy the machinery to affix the stamps properly. And then we'd once that awarded, we'd have to monitor the system. And then with that, we'd have to hire people, extra people to make sure that this is going right. So in the short of it, that would be the plan. I think estimate with time would maybe be 6 to 9 months after the award. To do the RFP, I would say a month and a half.
And what is your position on a centralized bonded warehouse versus decentralized?
That's a good idea. It could make money for the government, but I think the revenues there, it's not all that great. It would be a problem logistically, and we'd have to hire more manpower. And then another thing is a place. Is there a place big enough to handle all 3-4 wholesalers and their stock? Where would I put something like this? I'd have to construct a building. I'm trying to get out of this building and construct a building for us because this building is really bad. So I don't know, logistically, would I have to rent, to put up this building? Those are the issues I think with that. Honestly, this is the first time I've heard of it. So I didn't really plan to answer a question related to it, but that would be my best, estimate of what we would need to do that. I'm not opposed to it if it would make more money, but then I'd have to weigh it and I'd have to balance it and look at the whole scheme of things and do what's best for, the government of Guam in terms of collections, because that's our main priority is collections of revenues to run the whole government of Guam.
So thank you. In regards to the AG's opinion or advice, what was their advice or at least interpretation regarding the cigarettes tax stamp law as far as discounts? Did they give any?
No, we didn't ask that question. No.
Okay, so that needs to be clarified.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. No questions at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Sabina. Senator Tello, do you have any questions, ma'am? And you'll be the last, and then the speaker will close this bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. If I start freezing, I'm just going to turn off my video so that I don't freeze here. Are you hearing me okay right now?
Yes.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Anyways, the reason why I jumped in because when you said we're going to wrap it up, and usually when you say that, it's the last person. So I apologize if you intended to put me on next, and I had to jump off for another meeting and come back. So I'm hoping I'm not answering the same question out. So I'll try and make this quick. Did Department of Revenue and Taxation, hi, Director Santos, did Department of Revenue Taxation, did you develop these rules and regs that are proposed in Bill 368? Were you part of? Okay, so you did not.
No.
Okay. And do you happen to? Well, I don't know who came up with the 12%, but the question too on Bill 369: who arrived at the 12% of total tax collection, and each month shall be paid for a successful RFP bidder. I'm not sure if that was explained earlier. If I missed it, I'll review the taping again, but I don't think you had anything to do with that either, Deputy Director Santos. So I'll move on to my next question. Actually, Mr. Chair, was Customs and Quarantine also given the opportunity to come and testify on this legislation? Because first, were they?
Was Custom invited? Custom has always been invited when we were talking about the tobacco stamp and all the enforcement on their part.
Did we
Yeah,
receive
but
any
as far as inviting them, no, I didn't invite them. I had the speaker and I had revenue and tax and the other folks that wanted to participate.
Okay.
The invitation was open.
Yeah. And I think moving forward, I do believe that something should be implemented, with regards to the stamp on the tobacco. But I think we should also incorporate their comments from Customs and Quarantine, since they are at the border and receive these products, and see what can be implemented there. Also, Ambrose and Midpack, I don't see them here as well. And if there's any testimony, I'd greatly like to hear what they would have to say about this as well.
They were invited.
If you look at, I guess not bootlegging, or what's the word you're calling it, Mr. Duenas? What's the word for those who are avoiding taxes, or?
Scofflaws. I don't know. Blackmail operators or black market operators.
Black market, right.
Off market. No.
Black market. Okay, and if you look at Custom and Quarantine, where all the products are coming in, like it was said earlier, there's only air, and shipping in these areas, and to see what they can do on their side as far as putting these stamps on it. But I think the problem here we're seeing is people buying cigarettes on base, and those cigarettes coming on base. So my question is, are we going to also put stamps on those cigarettes on base? Was it brought up?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so we're just going to rely on the private, the government, not the federal government side, but when these tobacco products come in, put the stamps on them, and that way you can tell if a store, a mom and pop store, any of these stores receive cigarettes, because we know that a lot of them actually come from on base, these cigarettes put at mom and pop stores. So I think that would address some of the issues, but I'm curious if we're planning on getting the military involved with the cigarettes that are coming in through the military as well. Is that
Senator Taitegui, if I could speak to that, cigarettes that are sold through any military installation, Guam does not have the authority to tax anything in the military installations. Also, any cigarettes that are sold at the airport in the duty-free stores, those are considered outside the export zone. So they're not subject. Those are exempt from tobacco and alcohol taxes. So when you have cigarettes or alcohol that's leaking out of the base into the Guam market, you don't know if they came from there. So yeah, there's no tax paid on that. If you had the tax stamp and it came out and the guy selling it in his store or in his bar, immediately that wasn't tax paid because there's no stamp. So we don't really need the cooperation of the military, because anything that comes out, we're going to assume that it's not tax paid if it doesn't have a tax stamp. So we don't need their cooperation to implement a program.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at here. With this stamp tax or stamp on the products itself, we can determine.
Bro, you froze.
So there's a lot of lost revenue there coming in. But other than that, I think I will review the tape. Like I said, I'm just jumping in. Appreciate, Art, all your comments that you made. It's always good to see you, Art. Thank you for being here. And then I'd like to ask that the oversight chair Senator Paris, if you can just, or Senator San Augustine, sorry, I forgot. I thought she was the, okay. If we can get Customs and Quarantines testimony, it'd be very helpful moving forward.
All right.
And that's all I have.
All right.
So thank you so
I'll
much.
reach out to them.
Thank you to Deputy Director Santos. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Senator.
All right, Madam Speaker, if you would close on your bill, please, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine, for giving me the opportunity. First, I want to make something clear. When this bill was passed, it was passed by Senator Mike Nicholas. Then, as it relates to the representation of if we were to do this through an RFP, the bill that was passed was at 40%. Trying to get an implementation and working up to 12% was something that would be better, so that more government funding will come in to revenue and taxation and not to anywhere else. So, Mr. Chair, my goal is plain and simple. One, it was to capture revenues that our people are paying, yet our government is losing out on. Two, I want to make sure we fund our healthcare, GMH, public health, and cancer care. Three, I want to use a local company to produce these stamps, because buying local, producing local, and supporting local is a very, very good idea. I also want to say that in the agency's admission that they have looked into other areas and took a trip to Hawaii, and I think even Saipan as well, I think that the priority of this should be really important. I was just made aware, Mr. Chair, that there is a post out there saying that I did this bill for special interest. First, the original owner of this bill is Senator San Nicholas. Second, I am the oversight chair of the Public Auditor, Office of Public Accountability. They said that $10 to $15 million are escaping our revenues. I, as the oversight, want to be responsible enough to give our government entities money that is due to them. And I want to make sure, Mr. Chair, that if there is a way that we need to work with our government agency to provide them the necessary tools, whether it be through a public-private partnership, whether it through be disbanding the bonded warehouse and giving it all to Rev and Tax, realizing that they said they don't have the manpower or the facility to build, how can we proactively and positively get these resources that are escaping Guam? So I want to close on that, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. I had another 2 paragraphs to mention, but I just think it's important to say that I have no vested interest but the interest of getting what is due to the government of Guam and giving the Department of Revenue and Taxation all the funding it needs and the Healthy Future funds to move this program, because health and the welfare of our island is important, and making sure that GMH, public health, and cancer care get those resources. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity. And I do look into getting more testimony from people like Customs and Quarantine, who, when they had the responsibility of doing it, the airport was at a failure, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
And I want to make sure that we do not make the same mistakes that have been happened in the past happen today. So moving forward, I want to say that I will continue to fight and make sure that we do not lose any more revenues that are due to our island of Guam.
All right, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Art Logan, and thank you, Ricardo Duenas and Deputy Director Michelle Santos for your
Thank you.
participation, my colleagues.
Okay.
There's no further additional individuals to present testimony. We will continue to reach out to the other agencies that we need to provide the information. The committee will continue to receive testimony. If you do have testimony, please submit the testimony to the mail room of the Guam Legislature in the Guam Congress building, or through email at senatorjoesnaugustine@gmail.com. It is now 4:34. We went beyond 30 minutes. I apologize, Senator Moylan. Bill 368 is now closed. I want to thank everyone for attending the public hearing and providing feedback and suggestions. Thank you, folks, for attending this public hearing on Bill 368. We will now proceed to entertain Bill 395. Thank you, Art. Thank you, Ricardo, for your participation, and Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will now proceed on to the next bill. And we have the Committee on General Government Operation Appropriation now called to order. It is now 4:30 or 35. Apologize for running late there, Senator Moylan. Here we go. Welcome to everyone connected by Zoom and those tuning in via television or the YouTube channel. Thank you for your patience in accommodating the Zoom platform while we maintain social distancing mandates. Notice for this public hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on Tuesday, September 22nd, and on Thursday, September 24th. The bill we will be entertaining at this time is Bill number 395-35, introduced by Senator James C. Moylan, an act to add Section 15212 to Guam Chapter 15, Title 4, Guam Code Annotated, relative to prohibiting contracts or post-employment for former elected officials. The Zoom meeting is hosted by my staff and will mute all Zoom participants until called upon. Members of the committee and or non-committee members wishing to speak may indicate their desire to the chair through the in-app chat feature. Individuals testifying shall be first recognized by myself before speaking and begin by stating their name for record-keeping purpose. When called to speak, please ensure that you are unmuted. Committee members will be allowed to pose a question to the individual testifying, and so far I don't have anybody else that's going to be testifying on this bill, other than we have questions that may be posed by my colleagues. Questions and testimonies shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the public hearing by the host. Please ensure that your video remains on throughout the hearing. Participants must be visible at all times and not engage in any other activity during the hearing. Failure to maintain visibility may cause your removal from the meeting live stream. I'd like to thank my colleagues for attending this afternoon's hearing, and I have Senator Jim Moylan present, who's the author of the bill. I have Senator Kelly Marsh Taitno. I have Senator Luis Muñoz, and we have Senator Sabina Perez, and we have Senator Tello Tidewi. I'm looking if there's anybody else, and I see Senator Jose Trelay may be still linked up from the other bill, but that's okay. I would like to ask also and inform Senator Moylan that your bill is still being reviewed by Legal Bureau. Okay, so as when we get their comment, we'll go ahead and hear the bill, but when we get their comment, then we'll determine then how far further this bill may move. Okay, but you will be kept informed of this. I'll ask you, Senator Moylan, to please provide your opening statement on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to my colleagues for being here as well. Mr. Chairman, since you read the act, what the bill is, I'll just give a brief summary of the bill. It's basically is that no former elected officials shall accept any employment as a classified or unclassified, appointed temporarily, a limited term appointment, or an exempt employee, or even enter into a contractual agreement for service in the government of Guam or any government of Guam instrumental within 12 months from their last day in the elected position. Now, in the bill, it has 4 exceptions to this provision. And they are: first, if the position is an educator with the Guam Department of Education, University of Guam, or the Guam Community College; or second, as a licensed health professional at the Guam Memorial Hospital or Department of Public Health and Social Services; or third, is a duly sworn peace officer of law; and then finally, in a position as an elected official. So that's basically what the bill tends to do, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple of testimonies, and I believe it was submitted to the committee, and I'll be happy to read those testimonies if you wish, Mr. Chairman.
Please, if you could, Senator Moylan, if you could please, I'm looking for copies of your testimonies, and if you please could.
Okay, thank you. So the first testimony is from Mr. Jess Mendiola, and he's giving the written testimony in support of the bill 395-35. And I'll just read it as written. I believe that our government and its three branches are in a place to provide a checks and balances for our democracy. However, more often than less, those checks and balances are often compromised by the rewarding of political favors, both while one is in office and immediately thereafter. It is because of those political favors that our people whom we are elected to serve are often shortchanged in receiving the best return on their investment. The investment of us as policymakers to provide for them and lead them. As a result, ethics are compromised, integrity is tainted, and corruption seeps within the crevices and cracks of the very system we are elected to maintain. I believe this bill would slowly balance the scales of accountability in the area that has been clouded far too long. The logic is quite simple. Having an elected official not via for any government position after the office prevents them from furthering another political agenda. This tit for tat has been a common occurrence within our body of structure. It is time to reconstruct that body to serve the very people we are meant to serve, the people and not our self-interest. 12 months of a waiting period is actually a decent compromise before allowing an elected official to be appointed or hired for a high-ranking government position. As a son of Guam, as a voice of her island, I encourage you to strongly support the decision and passing of this bill so that the people can begin to see the cracks and crevices are being filled with trust and integrity instead of corruption and personal interests. Those that oppose this bill will lead the people of Guam to come to the conclusion that the opposition are part of the problem as opposed to becoming the solution. Thank you, as submitted by Mr. Jesman Diola. And then there's one other testimony that I have is from Mr. Dominic Hernandez. Prohibiting contracts or post-employment for former elected officials. And then he provides a quotation. The world as we have created, it is a process of thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. That's from Albert Einstein. And then it goes on to read, change is what the people of Guam desire and need. Bill 395-35 introduces this idea of changing the way we have done things, especially in regards to the terminology of the PARI system. The question is not, is a former elected official possibly qualified for other positions within our government, but rather, why should a former elected official be given an opportunity and an appointed official position of authority without our government if the people felt the individual was not worthy or trusted enough to be reelected? The fact that this happens so often is the reason why the terminology of the PARI system exists to begin with. We are a small island with a population of roughly 170,000 citizens. I understand that our ability to find people qualified for the appointed positions of authority is limited, but not impossible. 36,000 plus citizens who are unemployed or counting on everyone who is involved in the government to be able to pull our island through these tough times. We can ill afford to give positions of authority to those because of connections versus their actual qualifications. The possibility exists that former elected officials could be well qualified for the appointed position. But one has to wonder how many others within the 36,000 unemployed individuals are possibly qualified for the same appointed position as well. Do they not deserve the chance to compete for the appointed position? Or does the PARI system decide the outcome of who will be picked? Bill 395-35 allows the opportunity for others who equally deserve the chance to qualify for the appointed position without interference or thought of the pari system being used to decide the final outcome of the position. Ultimately, Bill 395-35 challenges the idea of the pari system and sets a checks and balances between the ordinary citizen and those who are politically or well-connected. Change is what the people of Guam deserve and need. Bill 395-35 is the perfect opportunity for those in the Senate to prove their interest is for the common good of the public. Otherwise, where we do draw the line of morality when it comes to deciding policy. The purpose of why those who are elected officials are known as politicians is because their job is to decide policy. Question is do you as a politician decide to say policy is determined by what is best for the common good of all, or is it determined based on your political interest? Bill 395-35 is rejected without at least going back to amend or reform the ideas to help perfect the idea of the bill. It will indicate to me that a common citizen, that policy is driven by political interest rather than the interest of common good for all. Bill 395-35 is a game changer because it changes the old system of what we know as the pari system and introduces a new system that is based upon the idea of equal opportunity for all. If this bill is rejected, then I ask one question. What will it take to finally end the idea of the pari system within our government? It's submitted by Dominic J. Hernandez. He's also a candidate for Senator number 3 in the Republican Party. Those are the two testimonies that I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Senator Jim. Does any of my colleagues would like to speak to this bill? I'm going to comment, but I'll comment right before I ask Senator Jim to close. Senator Kelly, do you have anything you want? No comment. Senator Tello, you have any comment you wanted to bring
I
up?
was waiting to give a comment.
Oh, okay. Well, Senator Kelly, you're next.
So I remember this when it was an amendment for the budget bill. And so I still have the same questions. I like to think through the logic of things and so forth. So with the exceptions, can you explain or walk us through the process of how those exceptions were arrived at so that we can understand them?
Sure, Senator Kelly. Let's see. Okay, the first three exceptions are for
Oops, oh, I think you muted yourself accidentally.
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Senator Kelly.
Yeah.
There's four exceptions. The first three regards public safety, public health, and public education, the critical needs of our government and where we're always short the most. So that was the logic behind those positions, to have those filled if you are qualified, a former police officer like the chairman, a Department of Corrections employee like myself, or educator as yourself too. If there was a nurse involved as well. These are critical positions, and we know, like our nursing right now, especially, we're hiring people from off island at a high amount of money, and we're always short of teachers and peace officers. It's just so difficult to come about and get them interested. So that's the logic between the first three. The second, or the last one, being a position of an elected official. Let's say we decide to run for another position. Then there's nothing preventing us from doing that. As senator, and we want to run for example, mayor, or run for Congress, or run for governor, or run for public auditor. You're going to run again as to be elected by the people of Guam. So it's important, and we know it's hard to find people that are even interested in running for these positions too. So not preventing that person from seeking other elected positions. But the whole idea is that preventing for 1 year from being appointed in these high level management positions within the government of Guam, director of this or that. And it's not to say that the person is not qualified, but it's also to say if I may be as one of the statements that was read, the PARE system, right? So I ran, for example, if I was to run for office.
I was just asking how you arrived at those four.
Okay,
But
all
it was
right.
a very, it was a helpful explanation. So with that, and again, I still have, sorry, I was trying to get to my PDF. I mean, they're noted that it's part-time, classified, unclassified, what have you. And so, having been somebody who's grown up on the island and worked here in various types of positions, and just having interacted with a lot of offices, well, and even just studying the Pacific in general, the Pacific in general has a lot of shortages for expertise. We hear of a variety of types of expertise. It's hard to get people out here. Maybe it's hard to convince us to go get educated and come back. I mean, there are a variety of reasons why our island societies struggle. And so I just worry a little bit with the categories, because there are some positions, and I'm going to preface it and remind people I am not an archaeologist when I say this, but our Historic Preservation Office has desperately needed and put out a call for one or two archaeologists for at least a couple of, if not many, years now. And so right now, there is no politician that I am aware of that's an archaeologist, but I'm just wondering if there's a way to deal with this criteria so that if somebody is filling a critical need, and it's still, a critical need to, that there might be a way to categorize recognizing this, so that if our Historic Preservation Office or if our Department of, whichever out there, I mean, Revenue and Tax, we were just hearing how they've been looking for an attorney for a while, that that if there is a need and it hasn't been filled, I mean, maybe that's it. If it hasn't been filled for a couple of years, that there might be an exception. So I'd just like to have us continue to think about that a little bit, because there are these really dire areas of our government that need a certain type of expertise that I just wouldn't maybe want to shut the door on any more than our need for a nurse or a doctor or something like that. And so just to maybe broaden that concept of what critical is, if you could, and I will too, I will try to continue to think about like what makes sense so that we're meeting the critical needs of the community and we're not shutting the door on that. But if both you and I could try to think of that a little bit more, just to see if there's something fruitful out there.
Yeah.
So just Masi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. I think those are excellent ideas and worth looking into. And of course, while we're in committee, I'm sure we can come up with something to move this forward.
All right.
But thank you very much for the question.
Senator Tello, do you have anything you would like to bring up? Any questions you want to ask of Senator Jim, your colleague?
Well, yeah, no, I think what he's trying to do makes sense, and I think a lot of people share the same sentiments. I'm sure a lot of our senators don't, because you never know what's going to happen. But I think he's covered the areas that are crucial to the government, which is education, healthcare, and these areas. To be hired in those critical areas is important. I'd like to see some other, couple other areas that might be critical as well. But as we're formulating this legislation, I think Senator Marsh had some good questions too. To ensure our archaeologists are not included to the list. I never would have thought of that one, but it's a good one. But for me, I think that I'd also like to find out too if it's amenable to the legislative branch as well as the judicial branch You talk about the administration, but what about going to places like the judicial branch and public safety, which we need more of, and the legislative branch, which, you're just going back. So that might be something the author might consider thinking about, to exempting these two areas of that as well. And the other one is to, what are the consequences if that should happen? If there's a violation, any violation, what is the consequence? So that, I think, maybe to think about when you're formulating the other comments that we're making, Senator Moylan. I think there should be some consequences to that, and not just the bill. And I'm hope I can share some other insights with you, but I appreciate what you're trying to do, and trying to stop what's been done in the past many times, because we all know the reality of it is sometimes you get individuals who are favoring the administration just to get a job. I mean, let's be straight and blunt about it, and it does not serve the people to do that. And this is one way we can make this legislature accountable. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Tello. And for me, just to right before Senator Jim closes, that we spoke about this, and I've mentioned it to you, Senator Jim, that I looked at the overall picture of this bill from line 5 all the way down to line 14. And the first thing I asked, I was very specific views that if you said director, deputy director, I have no problem with that one. Every other position I have a problem with, because I have no problem if I mean, all our colleagues are great, would be great PIOs. Let's face it, we all know how to speak to the people. And just because you weren't reelected or you choose not to run doesn't make you a good qualified individual in the government of Guam. And with the expertise, if you choose not to run or you lost, well, you can't be a director, you can't be a deputy director, and that's okay. I can understand that if that was what the bill was about. But you pretty much caught everything, and you mentioned that as a former police officer is great, but I'm also a former revenue and tax. This bill prevents me from going back to be a criminal investigator, prevents me from helping out what we just discussed about compliance office. The need they have, and some of our colleagues here are great people. You don't identify attorneys. There's certain things, but Jim will work on this, Senator Jim, and I know the other of our colleagues will come up with some good comprehensive where I understand the intent, and I agree with you, but we just got to trim it down, and we can't include any other branch of government. I would be hesitant to do that, to say let's prevent the courts from hiring people when they're running short of people, and let's not allow the legislature to bring their expertise back to help develop bills for currently elected officials. It's kind of like we just got to let it flow. And as far as the party system, depends on who's the governor and which party you're at, Jim. Senator Jim, that how that works, and it's happened in previous. And we're trying to figure out a way how to streamline that, bring it down to where it's reduced. And that's something that I agree with what your intent was, Senator Jim. Would you like to make a closing statement to your bill, and then we can wrap this one up?
Sure. I want to thank the committee, and I'm very interested in bringing this back to the committee so we can iron it down, trim it down, and see what other great ideas we have to move this bill forward. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the committee's comments. Thank you.
All right, and thank you, Senator Jim, for your closing. And a reminder to everyone, we're still waiting for a legal review of the bill, so we can, and then you'll be informed exactly what their comments are. And there being no one else to testify, the committee will continue to receive testimony from anybody in the public or any of the political folks who like to submit any, and please submit the testimony. You can drop it off at the mailroom of the Guam Legislature in the Guam Congress building, or you can submit it through email at senatorjoesnogstein@gmail.com. It is now 4:59. And again, I want to thank everyone for attending the public hearing, for providing feedback and suggestion. I apologize for we started late, but we were able to catch up real quick, Senator Jim. It is now 4:59. The public hearing is now adjourned. And please be safe and have a nice day. Take care.